Hi guys. Tonight we wander through time, stepping softly into the cool breath of a medieval castle. You stand at the threshold as if in a dream, your fingers brushing against rough limestone blocks that have survived more winters than anyone can count. Somewhere above, a raven caws, the sound echoing through the morning mist that curls around towers and ramparts like smoke. You can almost feel the weight of centuries pressing in on you. It's beautiful, but it's also a little intimidating. After all, if you really lived here, you probably wouldn't survive this life for long. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. You take your first step through the castle gate. The world seems to hush. Thick walls mute the outside sounds, transforming wind and birds into distant whispers. The ground beneath your boots is uneven, a mix of packed dirt and cobblestone, worn smooth by countless feet. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, damp wool, and something metallic, like the tang of old iron. This is not the grand, glittering fantasy often shown in films. It is quieter, earthier, full of echoes of chores and prayers, laughter and fatigue. Inside, you find yourself in the outer courtyard. A stable hand leads a horse past you, its breath steaming in the morning chill. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith's hammer rings in slow, rhythmic patterns, like a heartbeat beneath the castle's skin. Chickens peck at the mud. A kitchen boy rushes by with a bucket of scraps, muttering apologies as he slips through a doorway too small for him. The place feels alive, not in the way a modern city hums, but in the way a forest hums, organic, busy, and strangely peaceful. It's easy to imagine that castles were places of constant war and violence, but most of the time, they were homes. Real people lived here. They got up, worked, gossiped, fell in love, got tired, got sick, and went to bed. Life inside a medieval castle might have been rough, but it also had its patterns, its comforts, and its simple pleasures. You pause beneath an archway. The stones here are mottled with lichen, and the mortar between them has crumbled into soft grey dust. Someone once built this with their hands, stone by stone, without power tools or machinery. It's humbling to imagine the effort. Historians still argue whether these enormous walls were built primarily for defense or prestige, but perhaps both were true. After all, a high wall protects your body, but it also declares your importance. You move deeper inside. The air grows cooler, drier. Sunlight pours through narrow windows, scattering gold across flagstones. Your footsteps echo softly. The architecture feels both human and inhuman, made for people, yet indifferent to them. You might run your hand along a groove carved by a mason centuries ago and wonder who he was. Did he have children? Did he hum a tune while he worked? We'll never know, but those invisible fingerprints remain all around you. In the corner, a tapestry hangs. The colours have faded, but the shapes are still clear: knights in armour, a lady with a hawk, a lion that looks oddly like a shaggy dog. The threads are uneven, but the artistry is careful. Each stitch tells a story, maybe one the castle's owner wanted to be remembered by. You can almost hear the whisper of the weaver's needle. A mainstream fact: tapestries weren't just decoration. They kept rooms warm by trapping air and blocking drafts from the stone walls. A simple piece of woven art could mean the difference between shivering all winter and staying almost comfortable. And yet, here's a quirky truth. Some lords ordered tapestries showing imaginary ancestors or fabricated victories just to make their lineage seem grander. History, after all, has always been part performance. You climb a short staircase that curves upward in a tight spiral. The steps are uneven and narrow, designed so that defenders could swing swords more easily with their right hand if enemies ever stormed the tower. Every detail of this place has logic hidden in it. Still, it's surprisingly tranquil. You can feel your heartbeat slowing, your breath deepening. At the top, you reach a parapet overlooking the countryside. From here, you can see a patchwork of fields and forests stretching to the horizon. Smoke rises from a few huts beyond the outer wall. You imagine farmers already at work, tilling soil that's damp with dew. Inside the walls, life hums along in smaller ways. Someone sweeping, someone singing under their breath, someone muttering a prayer before beginning another long day. You notice how the walls themselves seem alive with the faint hum of wind. The castle isn't silent, it breathes, it creaks, it whispers, it remembers. Maybe that's why you feel such calm standing here. Time itself seems slower inside these stones. Below, you spot a servant leading a goat toward a small enclosure. Another carries a bundle of herbs. Everyday life unfolds with gentle order. And yet, your mind drifts. What would it be like to live here year after year, waking to bells and falling asleep to torchlight? Would the grandeur fade into routine, or would it always feel a little magical? A swallow swoops past your head, vanishing into a gap between stones. It has probably nested here for years, safe from hawks. Even nature has learned to coexist with the architecture of men. You wonder if the people who lived here felt the same security, or if they were always looking over their shoulders, waiting for the next siege or famine. Historians still debate how often castles were truly attacked. Many were never touched by war at all. They were more symbols of control than fortresses of battle. Like a modern skyscraper, they announced power just by existing. And yet, for the people living within, they were just home. As you turn back toward the staircase, a faint sound rises from below, a bell, perhaps, calling everyone to morning duties. Its tone is mellow, slightly off-key, and comforting. The day begins. And so does your quiet journey through this world. You descend again, feeling that same cool air brushing against your face. The first warmth of firelight flickers from a nearby hall. You follow it, drawn by instinct. Somewhere beyond those walls, breakfast waits, and so does another rhythm of medieval life, steady, imperfect, and strangely soothing. You pause once more before stepping inside, taking in the scent of smoke, damp stone, and fresh bread. The castle, for all its harshness, feels peaceful now. It's a self-contained world with its own seasons, its own sounds, its own heartbeat. You take a deep breath and let it fill you. And as you step forward into the great hall, the story quietly unfolds around you. The firelight greets you before the warmth does. Inside the great hall, the heart of castle life beats in the gentle flicker of flames. Long before you see the hearth, you can smell it, the deep, resinous scent of oak logs mixed with a faint wisp of peat. The smoke curls up toward the beams, where it lingers and stains the wood dark. Around you, the hall begins to wake, just as you do. You move slowly, adjusting to the dimness. Tall candles sputter on iron stands, their wax pooling like tiny lakes. Servants hurry to set the trestle tables, their soft footfalls muted by rushes scattered across the floor. Each rush is fresh cut from the nearby river bank, sprinkled with mint, lavender, or wild thyme to sweeten the air. You bend down to touch one, and it releases a cool fragrance that mingles with the smoke. The great hall is the castle's lungs. It is where everyone gathers. Lords, ladies, servants, guests, musicians, and even dogs that curl by the fire. You can almost hear the ghosts of laughter still clinging to the beams from the feast held the night before. A hound stretches lazily beside a discarded bone. A servant scolds it in a whisper, but the dog only yawns. A new day has begun, and with it comes the steady rhythm of medieval order. The first task of the morning belongs to the fire tender, who must coax embers from last night's ashes. He pokes gently, hums under his breath, and soon the logs crackle to life. You feel a tiny rush of heat on your face. The light grows, pushing the shadows back inch by inch. You take a seat at a long wooden table. The grain is rough, scarred with knife marks, and sticky with candle wax. This is not the table of legend, where golden goblets gleam. It's simpler, plainer, but no less noble in its own way. Wooden trenchers lie stacked beside bowls carved from horn. Jugs of weak ale wait to be poured. A loaf of yesterday's bread sits hard as stone, ready to be softened in broth. A mainstream fact: breakfast in medieval times was rarely grand. In many households it was skipped altogether. But inside castles, where days began early and work was heavy, a light meal was common: bread, cheese, ale, maybe some porridge if oats were plentiful. It wasn't until later in the day that the true feasting began. A maid with red cheeks and fraying sleeves carries in a tray of steaming bowls. The scent of barley porridge fills the air, comforting in its simplicity. You dip a spoon in, and it tastes of smoke, salt, and something faintly sweet, perhaps honey, or perhaps the grain itself. The texture is soft but hearty, and the warmth spreads through you like sunlight. As you eat, the hum of the hall grows louder. The Lord's steward is already striding up and down, issuing quiet orders. Two young boys sweep the floor in long strokes. At the far end, a few sleepy knights sit hunched over their bowls, half listening to the steward, half lost in thought. Their armor glints faintly in the firelight. You can hear the occasional clank of metal as they shift. Historians still argue whether the Great Hall was truly a place of comfort or a place of constant performance. Every meal was a public act, every gesture a signal of rank. Even where you sat at the table mattered. Closer to the fire meant higher status. Farther back, near the door, meant you were among the lesser folk still welcome, but reminded of your place. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. Some castles kept small wooden screens to shield noble diners from the sight and smell of the servants' work. It was a medieval version of an open-plan home pretending to be private. The noble could dine in peace, but the entire castle still revolved around their appetite. You glance up at the rafters. A few doves have made their home there, fluttering between beams. They coo softly, unbothered by the clamour below. Somewhere, a lute strums a hesitant melody, perhaps a servant practicing before the day's entertainment. The sound mingles with the chatter of servants, creating an odd but peaceful harmony. You notice how the light changes as the sun climbs higher. Thin streaks of gold push through narrow windows, catching the edges of metal cups and the tips of rushes. Dust dances in those beams like drifting snow. Everything feels still, suspended between duty and calm. A small boy with tousled hair runs across the hall, carrying a jug of ale almost too heavy for him. He trips, spills a little, and freezes in terror. The steward sighs, wipes his brow, and tells him softly to refill it. The boy nods, relieved. Life here is strict, but not without mercy. The castle's rhythm is beginning to rise. You can sense it in the overlapping sounds: the clatter of kitchen pans, the distant bark of a dog, the call of a guard from the ramparts. This is what morning feels like in stone and smoke. Somewhere in the corner, a group of women sit with baskets of herbs and linens. They gossip quietly as they work, their hands moving fast. One of them laughs, a sharp, bright sound that cuts through the murmur. You catch a few words about a visiting knight and a lost glove, and you smile. Not everything in castle life is solemn. It's full of small dramas, whispered secrets, and human warmth. As the last bowl of porridge is cleared, the servants begin preparing for the next phase of the day. The great hall will soon shift its purpose from breakfast to court, from casual chatter to ceremony. Tables will be moved, benches rearranged, banners straightened. This room is endlessly flexible, changing with the Sunday. You stand, brushing crumbs from your tunic. The fire crackles contentedly. A beam of sunlight lands squarely on the Lord's empty chair at the high table, waiting for its master. It feels like the castle itself is holding its breath. You take one last look around. Every detail, from the rushes on the floor to the smoke-stained ceiling, tells a story of endurance. The people here may be gone, but their habits still echo in the bones of the place. As you turn toward the side door, a bell tolls faintly from the chapel tower. Morning prayers are beginning. Soon you'll explore what it meant to dress, to serve, to simply exist in this world of fabric, etiquette, and quiet pride. The hall grows brighter, dust swirls in lazy circles, and for a moment, it almost feels like time itself is dancing in the air. The fire behind you fades as you step into a smaller chamber, where the air smells faintly of linen and beeswax. Morning light trickles through a narrow slit of a window, landing on a chest carved with swirling vines. Inside it, folded neatly, are the garments that will shape your day. Dressing, in this world, is never just about covering your body. It's about declaring who you are and where you belong. You begin with the simplest layer, a linen shirt that feels cool against your skin. It's soft, washed so many times that it carries the memory of the soap and the hands that scrubbed it. The thread was probably spun by someone in the village, the fabric bleached in the spring Sunday. In castles, linen is precious, both practical and prized. It absorbs sweat, and it can be cleaned without falling apart. People in the Middle Ages valued cleanliness far more than the myths suggest. Next comes the wool. A tunic slips over your head, heavy and slightly itchy, dyed a muted green with herbs that left faint earthy scents in the fabric. Wool is the heartbeat of medieval clothing, warm, durable, alive with the faint musk of the sheep it came from. Many chroniclers of the time believed that fine wool was as valuable as coin, traded and taxed across kingdoms. To wear it is to show quiet wealth. A servant kneels to help with your hose, two long tubes of fabric tied to your belt with cords. The gesture feels strangely intimate, yet ordinary here. Every morning begins this way for the castle's lords and ladies, attended by people whose job is to notice every button, every lace, every wrinkle. Their eyes are trained to catch flaws. Even a misplaced thread might be whispered about later in the servants' quarters. Over your tunic, you fasten a belt of soft leather, decorated with tiny metal studs. Hanging from it is a small knife, your eating tool, your defense, your everyday companion. A faint chill runs through the metal when you touch it. Archaeological evidence shows that most nobles carried their personal knives everywhere, using the same blade for meals, letters, and emergencies alike. It was less a weapon, more an extension of their identity. Now the finer touches. A surcoat, perhaps, in blue or crimson, with your family's crest embroidered near the chest. The needlework glimmers slightly in the light, each stitch a sign of labor done by women whose names are long forgotten. Curiously enough, some noble women stitched hidden symbols into clothing, tiny hearts, initials, even prayers sewn beneath seams where only the wearer would feel them. A silent language of affection and faith woven into fabric. The servant brings a small mirror, polished metal rather than glass. Your reflection is blurred, like looking through rippling water. You tilt your head, and the faintest smile touches your lips. Vanity exists here too, though it hides behind duty and custom. Looking proper is part of surviving. A frayed cuff could invite mockery. A mismatched color might hint at poverty. In a world obsessed with hierarchy, appearance is armor. Some modern researchers suggest that medieval color meanings were more fluid than we imagine. Blue might represent loyalty one century and melancholy the next. Scarlet could mean wealth, or sin, or piety depending on who you ask. But to the people dressing each morning, the choice wasn't philosophical, it was practical. What do you have? What can you mend? What makes you feel alive in a world of stone? You lace up your boots, stiff leather softened with tallow. They creak as you walk, snug, but not yet comfortable. Down the corridor, another servant carries a basket of freshly laundered shirts, their whiteness startling against the grey walls. Somewhere deeper in the castle, the laundresses are hanging garments near the kitchen fire to dry. You can almost hear the hiss of steam, smell the sharp mix of ash and soapwort. There's still a faint hum of human presence in every fabric. People touched these clothes before you. Spinners, dyers, weavers, tailors, each left an invisible fingerprint. If you listen closely, you can almost imagine the rhythm of their looms, the steady thump of pedals, the creak of wooden frames. The castle depends on that sound, though it's rarely heard in the Lord's chambers. There's an ongoing debate among historians about how much freedom castle servants truly had in their dress. Some argue they were strictly regulated, forbidden to wear bright colours or fine materials. Others think rules were often ignored, especially when lords were lenient or away at war. Maybe both are true. After all, humans have always found quiet ways to express themselves, even under watchful eyes. You fasten a small clasp at your shoulder, shaped like a lion's head. The metal feels cold, grounding. You glance down at yourself, now fully dressed, and realize how much thought goes into simply existing here. Every layer speaks linen for humility, wool for endurance, silk for status. Even the discomfort carries meaning. The castle is not built for ease, but for order. In a corner, a maid adjusts your cloak, shaking out the fold so it falls just right. She works quickly, silently, but her eyes flick toward the window where the sunlight lands. Maybe she's thinking of her own simple tunic waiting downstairs. Maybe she's thinking of her family outside the walls. You catch her glance, and for a second, the distance between lord and servant feels smaller, fragile, human. When she steps back, you nod. She curtsies, then retreats. The silence that follows feels almost holy. You stand there, wrapped in colour and history, a living emblem of your time. Outside, bells toll again, their sound rolling through the stone like waves. It's time to join the rest of the household. You walk toward the door, feeling the weight of your garments settle comfortably on your shoulders. The corridor beyond is brighter now, alive with the day's movement. As you step into it, you leave behind the hush of the dressing chamber and step into the heartbeat of castle life, once more ready to face breakfast, duty, and whatever the world inside these walls demands of you. The smell of warm bread guides you through a narrow passage that twists toward the kitchens. It is still early, and yet the castle hums with life. Pots clatter. Voices rise and fall in the rhythm of routine. You duck beneath a low archway and emerge into a space filled with motion and light. The fire roars beneath a great cauldron, and the walls glow orange in the flicker. The scent is rich, earthy, and comforting. This is breakfast, though few here would call it that. The word itself would have sounded strange to most medieval ears. What you find instead is the first shared moment of nourishment, a gentle gathering before the harder work of the day begins. You join a bench near the fire, where a table has been laid with trenchers of coarse bread, jugs of ale, and small bowls of pottage. The simplicity of the scene feels grounding. Records from the period show that many nobles began the morning with bread dipped in wine or watered ale, believing it steadied the stomach. Even priests approved of it, as long as it was modest. To eat too richly before prayer was considered sinful, yet a body needed fuel. The balance between devotion and hunger shaped every morning meal. You tear a piece of bread, its crust firm and warm. It tastes faintly of smoke, touched by the heat of the oven built right into the castle wall. A thin layer of butter glistens on your fingers. Around you, the servants speak in low tones, trading news about the weather and the harvest. Their voices rise and fall like waves, soft and steady. In the corner, a steward checks the food stores, muttering numbers to himself. Grain must last the season. Salted meat must be rationed carefully. Oddly enough, many castles kept fish ponds within their walls, not just for luxury but to guarantee food during Lent and fasting days. Those quiet pools were as important as walls and moats. You sip the ale. It's weak, barely stronger than water, but safe to drink. Water alone could carry illness, and people knew it even if they didn't understand why. The ale tastes slightly sour, the way yeast does when it's still alive. It fills your chest with gentle warmth. Someone nearby jokes about needing another jug before sunrise, and laughter ripples through the hall. The castle's lord has not yet appeared, and that gives everyone room to relax. A maid leans against the hearth for a moment, rubbing her hands together. A cook hums softly as he stirs the pot. The scene feels timeless, a small sanctuary before hierarchy returns. Archaeological finds suggest that breakfasts were served at different times depending on rank. Workers ate early, nobles later. Some modern researchers suggest that the timing itself was part of the social signal. An early meal meant labor awaited, a later one meant leisure. You can sense that invisible structure even here. In the unspoken way, people pause when a noble passes. The pottage in your bowl thickens as it cools, a mixture of barley, peas, and herbs. The scent is pleasant, the taste humble but filling. Someone sprinkles salt from a tiny pouch, a gesture of extravagance. Salt was precious, often locked away in chests, measured carefully like treasure. To offer it freely is a quiet kindness. At another table, two older servants argue playfully about whether the Lord's hawk has grown lazy. One insists the bird will fly truer if it eats less. The other says it's just moody from the cold. The conversation feels ordinary, modern even. The rhythm of work and gossip transcends centuries. Curiously, a few castle records mention that some lords began their days with a sip of spiced wine, believing it strengthened the heart. The mixture often included cinnamon or ginger imported through Venice, luxuries that smelled like faraway lands. To wake up with such aromas was to taste the reach of empire, even if one never left the walls. As you finish your meal, a bell rings faintly in the distance. The sound drifts through the hall, long and slow. It signals the start of prayers. Wooden spoons clatter into bowls as servants clear the tables. The transition from eating to worship happens naturally, like breath flowing into silence. You stand, brushing crumbs from your tunic. The firelight paints the faces around you in shades of amber and shadow. Each person looks both weary and peaceful. For a brief moment, there is equality here, forged by hunger and warmth. Then, as footsteps echo down the corridor, the mood changes. The steward straightens his posture. The servants bow their heads. The lord of the castle enters. His cloak catches the light, and his boots strike the floor with calm authority. He offers a small nod, acknowledging his people. It's enough to fill the room with a quiet reverence. He sits, and the others watch as his breakfast is brought forth, bread softer, cheese finer, perhaps a few slices of dried fruit from distant shores. Many chroniclers of the time believed that a ruler's appetite reflected the health of the realm. To eat well was to show order and control. To fast publicly was to demonstrate piety. The meal itself was a message. Even this simple scene of bread and ale is a performance of power. When the Lord is done, he blesses those gathered. His voice carries warmth but also distance. He rises, gestures to his steward, and departs to begin the day's counsel. The hall exhales again. Servants resume movement, sweeping, washing, laughing softly. The ordinary rhythm returns, patient and enduring. You walk toward the open door, where cool air rushes in from the courtyard. The scent of earth and horses greets you. Outside, light pours over the stone like liquid gold. Breakfast has ended, but the day is only beginning. You step out, full and calm, ready to wander deeper into the castle's pulse. The world behind you settles into memory, a faint echo of warmth and laughter that lingers in the halls like perfume. Ahead lies work and noise, and the endless hum of daily life. But for now, the morning feels kind. The courtyard greets you with a burst of colour and noise. You step through a heavy wooden door into a space alive with movement. Chickens dart between the legs of stable boys. Hooves clatter on cobblestones as a groom leads a restless horse toward the stables. The air smells of hay, leather, and damp earth. Somewhere nearby, someone is hammering iron, each strike sharp enough to make your chest tremble. The castle is awake now, its heart beating in hundreds of small sounds. You move through it at an unhurried pace, watching how each corner hums with purpose. The courtyard isn't just an open space, it's the nerve center of the castle, where trades, chores, and gossip all collide. Near the well, two women kneel beside buckets, their sleeves rolled up, arms wet from scrubbing linen. They chatter quietly, their laughter mixing with the splash of water. One tells a story about a traveling merchant who swore he could charm wolves with his flute. Her friend snorts and says he probably just smelled worse than the wolves. The humor is simple and warm, a reminder that joy exists even inside walls of duty. At the far end, the blacksmith works his forge. Sparks rise in a shower of gold each time his hammer falls. The sound is steady, hypnotic. His apprentice fans the bellows, eyes wide with concentration. A fragment of history survives here. Some surviving records describe blacksmiths as semi-sacred figures, believed to wield both craft and mystery. Their ability to shape metal was seen as something close to magic. Watching the glow of the forge, you can understand why. The rhythmic pounding draws others closer. A few guards pause to watch. One adjusts his helmet, still shiny from polishing. Another wipes sweat from his brow and jokes that his sword might soon be dull again if peace lasts much longer. The remark earns soft laughter, half relief, half superstition. Even in calm times, people here live with one foot in the memory of battle. You wander toward the stables. The smell grows stronger, sweet hay mixed with manure and the musky scent of horses. Inside, a stable boy hums as he brushes a mare. His movements gentle and sure. The animal flicks her tail lazily, leaning into his touch. Horses were the lifeblood of castle life, symbols of wealth and tools of survival. Some modern scholars suggest that noble families spent more on their horses' feed and care than on their servants' food. The horse, in a way, was a noble's reflection, strong, trained, and always watched. Outside again, you notice the rhythm of feet crossing the yard. Messengers hurry toward the gates, carrying letters sealed in wax. A carpenter repairs a broken barrel hoop. Children dart between adults, pretending to be knights, their wooden swords clacking with enthusiasm. One of them shouts that he is the king of the haystack before slipping and falling into the straw. The laughter that follows echoes off the stone. A curious piece of trivia survives from medieval accounts. People often complained about the noise of geese more than anything else in the courtyard. Their constant honking was both alarm and irritation. Geese were valued, though, for their keen ears and fierce tempers. Some castles even kept them as natural watchdogs. As if to prove the point, a goose near the well suddenly flaps its wings and shrieks at a passing cat, sending both running in opposite directions. You find yourself smiling. For all its grime and labor, the courtyard feels alive in the best possible way. Every person here, from the lowest stable hand to the highest knight, moves to the same rhythm. The castle depends on them, even if few ever notice. Near a shaded corner, a pair of washerwomen stretch sheets on ropes, the white cloth rippling in the breeze. Their hands are red from cold water. One hums a soft tune that rises above the noise, and for a moment, the sound transforms the yard into something gentler. Her song carries a simple melody that might have been sung for centuries, a tune that outlives names. There's a matter that still divides historians today: how much freedom servants and tradespeople really had inside castle walls. Some argue they were bound by near-constant supervision, watched and controlled at every turn. Others believe daily life was looser, more human, shaped by necessity and trust. You look around and see hints of both. The steward's watchful eyes glide across the yard, yet no one seems afraid. Work continues, and laughter still breaks through. You pause near a stack of barrels. A young cooper sits on one, eating a piece of apple, his hands stained with tar and pitch. He nods politely before getting back to work. His hammer makes small, precise taps, sealing a seam so the barrel will hold ale without leaking. Each movement is economical, learned through endless repetition. You realize that the beauty of castle life lies not in grandeur, but in this, the patient rhythm of skill and habit. A distant trumpet echoes from the gate tower. The sound ripples through the courtyard like wind across water. It signals the arrival of a visitor. Heads turn. The steward hurries forward, adjusting his robe. The guards straighten their backs. Even the chickens scatter. A few moments later, the drawbridge creaks as it lowers, the chains rattling like thunder. A small procession enters. Riders cloaked in dark blue, their horses muddy from travel. The lead rider dismounts, bows and hands a parchment to the guard. Messages, maybe alliances, maybe warnings. The air shifts with quiet anticipation. You stand still, watching history breathe in real time, and yet it all feels strangely peaceful. As the gate closes behind them, the noise gradually returns, the forge clanging, geese muttering, servants calling to one another. Life fills the silence left by ceremony. That's what this place does best. It endures. You take a step back toward the hall, brushing a speck of dust from your sleeve. The courtyard shrinks behind you into a mosaic of colors and movement. You can still hear the faint ring of metal and the flutter of cloth. The castle doesn't just live through battles or feasts. It thrives in moments like this, ordinary, unguarded, full of small stories stitched together by sunlight and sound. The wind picks up, carrying the smell of baked bread again. You turn your head toward it, following the scent. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, the servants will be preparing for the midday meal. Another rhythm begins to form, and you follow it, drawn deeper into the quiet wonder of the day. You move through a shadowed corridor lined with narrow slits of light that fall in pale ribbons across the floor. The faint smell of damp stone follows you as you approach a smaller doorway, its heavy oak door left slightly ajar. Inside lies a world most guests never see. It is quiet, purposeful, and filled with unseen hands that keep the castle alive. This is the realm of the servants. You step inside, and the air shifts. The ceiling is lower here, the light dimmer, the walls close enough that sound seems to cling to them. The clink of pottery, the whisper of cloth, the murmur of quiet conversation echo in gentle harmony. Servants move like a current, fluid and practiced. No one rushes, yet everything happens quickly. A girl kneels by the hearth, stirring a pot of herbs that sends up thin tendrils of fragrant steam. The scent of rosemary, sage, and something sharp like vinegar fills the air. It's meant to mask less pleasant odors, she explains softly when you ask. The castle breathes through scents as much as sound. Even the poorest servants try to make their quarters smell of something fresh. Records from medieval household accounts reveal a truth that rarely makes it into stories. Servants in great castles formed entire communities of their own. They celebrated feast days, shared gossip, sometimes even fell in love within the narrow world below the stairs. Their work began before dawn and ended long after the nobles had gone to bed. Yet they found laughter in small things, strength in routine, and dignity in their craft. You notice how they move around each other without colliding, each task perfectly timed with the next. One polishes pewter cups until they glow silver in the candlelight. Another folds linen napkins with quick, graceful motions. Two boys haul buckets of water up from the courtyard. Well, their faces red from the strain. The air hums with effort, but it feels calm, even content. A tall man in a dark tunic steps past you, his keys jingling softly at his belt. He is the steward, the unseen governor of this entire hive. His word carries authority second only to the lords. Some modern historians compare stewards to corporate managers, balancing resources, overseeing personnel, and maintaining impossible order. His eyes scan the room once, and without a word, everyone seems to work just a little faster. At a side table, an elderly woman sits with a spindle, twisting flax into thread. The rhythm is hypnotic, the soft whir of the spindle like a heartbeat. She smiles faintly, revealing toothless gums. You ask how long she has done this work. She shrugs, saying she can't remember a time before it. Her fingers move faster than her voice, the motions older than memory. Curiously, a few surviving letters from noblewomen mention specific servants by name, praising their loyalty or skill. Yet most of their lives are undocumented, lost between pages of history that cared more for titles than hands. These were the invisible architects of daily comfort, the people who kept the castle warm, clean, and human. You pause near a heavy wooden shelf stacked with candles, each one poured from tallow or beeswax. The smell of wax and smoke mixes with the air, warm and faintly sweet. A young boy dips a wick into melted wax, waits, then dips it again, building layers one by one. It takes patience to make light. Watching him, you realize that even small acts here carry a rhythm that soothes the senses. The servants' hall is humble but not joyless. A few clay mugs sit on a sideboard, half filled with ale. A cat sleeps on a folded cloak near the door, twitching its tail. One of the maids tosses it a crumb, and it bats lazily before settling again. In this small world, where status ends at the threshold, people find warmth in routine and companionship. There's ongoing disagreement among scholars about how much personal agency servants truly had. Some argue their lives were rigidly controlled, bound by contracts and the whims of their masters. Others see them as adaptable survivors who shaped their fates through quiet intelligence. You can almost sense that balance here. There's obedience, yes, but also pride. Every polished cup, every folded sheet carries a touch of self-respect. A bell rings somewhere overhead. Instantly, the movement changes. The lord and lady will be taking their seats soon, and preparations must be perfect. The stewards and maids quicken their pace. Trays are arranged, torches lit, doors checked. The hum of conversation fades into a steady rhythm of work. In one corner, a girl pauses to tie her hair back with a strip of linen. Her hands are rough, the skin cracked from lye and water. Yet she smiles as another servant makes a joke about a clumsy knight dropping his sword at supper the night before. The laughter that follows fills the room like sunlight. For a moment, the heaviness of duty melts into simple humanity. Oddly enough, some servants were allowed to travel with their lords, serving in distant courts or battlefields. Their loyalty became a currency, their discretion priceless. Others never left the castle at all, their entire world confined within these walls. You imagine what that must have felt like to measure life not in years or miles, but in corridors and seasons. The steward returns, checking the fire and nodding once in approval. He glances toward you, his gaze calm, but curious. Then he moves on. His silence speaks volumes. Here, dignity lives in restraint, in work done without complaint. You linger for a few moments longer, watching the rhythm return. The spindle turns, the kettle hums, the smell of herbs drifts through the air again, soothing and steady. You realize that while nobles ruled by title, it was these hands that ruled by rhythm. When you step back into the corridor, the sound fades behind you. The stones feel cool under your feet, and the faint light of morning has turned golden. You carry the warmth of that hidden world with you, the patience, the precision, the quiet grace that sustains everything unseen. Ahead, the faint splash of water echoes from a side passage. Perhaps a bath is being prepared, or a small moment of comfort is waiting. You follow the sound, curious, as the air begins to fill with the clean scent of mint and soapwort. The corridor narrows and grows warmer as you walk toward the source of that splashing sound. A faint mist hangs in the air, glowing softly in the light from a small window. You push open a heavy wooden door and find yourself in a bathing chamber, its stone floor damp and faintly scented with herbs. Inside, a large wooden tub sits near the hearth, steam rising in gentle ribbons toward the ceiling. So this is where the castle breathes out its tension. You step closer, the warmth wrapping around you like a quiet embrace. It feels rare, almost luxurious, in a world of endless labor. Contrary to the image of unwashed medieval life, cleanliness was not a forgotten art. It was a careful ritual, steeped in both comfort and belief. A servant pours hot water from a copper pot into the tub. The sound is soothing, rhythmic, almost musical. You notice the water glistening faintly with oil, little pockets of brightness swirling on the surface. She explains that it is infused with rosemary and marjoram to ease sore muscles. Mint leaves float like green petals. The scent is fresh and grounding. Records from medieval household accounts show that nobles often bathed weekly, sometimes even daily in warmer months. For them, bathing was both health and pleasure. It cleansed the body, yes, but also refreshed the spirit. Water was seen as a gift, one that connected purity to piety. Even those who could not afford tubs used cloths soaked in scented water to wipe their skin. You dip your hand into the tub. The water is warm, silky, and fragrant. Beneath the surface lies a bed of smooth river stones meant to trap heat. When you swirl the water, the stones knock gently against each other like whispered conversation. You imagine the calm it would bring after a long day wrapped in wool and duty. In a corner, a maid prepares clean linen. The cloth looks soft and pale, smelling faintly of lye and wildflowers. Her movements are practiced, patient. You can tell she takes pride in the smooth folds, the perfect stacking. She tells you quietly that she sometimes sneaks leftover herbs from the kitchen to scent the laundry. A small rebellion, but one that makes her world feel beautiful. Some surviving manuscripts on medieval medicine suggest that herbal baths were prescribed not only for cleanliness, but also to balance the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The idea seems quaint now, but it governed much of life then. A bath could be a treatment for melancholy as easily as for dirt. Water soothed the mind before anyone spoke of psychology. You watch the flames flicker beneath the cauldron that heats the water. The firelight dances along the wet walls, painting them with soft gold. Everything in this room glows. The sound of the fire and the faint trickle from a leaking bucket combine into a lullaby. You can almost forget the cold halls outside. Curiously enough, some medieval castles had dedicated bathhouses, with small drainage channels carved into the stone floors. Others simply used portable tubs carried into bedchambers or kitchens, whichever was warmer. Archaeological remains of these tubs still exist, their wood darkened with age but intact. Even in simplicity, there was care. You sit beside the tub and run your fingers over a bar of rough soap. It smells of tallow and ash, not pleasant but familiar. People of the time believed strongly in the power of scent to protect against illness. Lavender, sage, and rosewater were popular choices, not just for comfort but for safety. To smell good was to feel safe, as if fragrance itself could guard against plague or evil air. There's ongoing debate among historians about whether peasants and servants had access to regular baths. Some argue that only the wealthy could afford the luxury of hot water, while others point to public bathhouses and river-washing traditions as proof that cleanliness was widespread. The truth likely lies in between. For many, washing was an act of faith rather than vanity, a way to start fresh, no matter how humble the means. As the maid finishes her work, she hums softly, a tune that seems older than the walls. It echoes faintly, mixing with the sound of the boiling pot. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. It's easy to imagine the peace that must have filled this space on quiet evenings when the castle slept. The air heavy with steam, the body light with warmth. Another servant enters, carrying a small pot of powder made from ground herbs and dried petals. He sets it beside the tub and grins, saying that some guests prefer to smell like gardens instead of kitchens. You laugh softly. Even in a castle, humour survives. Oddly, one medieval text from southern France recommends bathing in wine for its supposed health benefits. The writer insisted it strengthened the blood and brought colour to the cheeks. You wonder whether anyone ever tried it seriously, or if it was just one of those expensive fancies reserved for kings who could afford to waste a barrel. The maid places a folded towel near the fire to warm it. The fabric catches the light, glowing like ivory. She adjusts a small curtain near the window, letting only a sliver of daylight through. The chamber grows softer, quieter. Even the fire seems to hush. You feel yourself relaxing, as if the air itself were exhaling. You take one last look around before leaving. The scent of herbs clings to your clothes, gentle and clean. It's a reminder that beneath the grime of history lies a deep love for comfort and ritual. People have always craved moments of calm, moments where the world slows down and warmth replaces worry. As you step back into the corridor, the chill feels sharper after the room's heat, yet you carry that calm with you like invisible armor. Somewhere ahead, faint laughter drifts from the training yard, and the metallic ring of blades follows it. Another kind of daily ritual is beginning, less soothing, but just as vital. You walk toward it, the rhythm of steel and footsteps guiding you forward into the heart of castle life. You follow the sound of steel clashing against steel, a crisp rhythm that echoes through the air like music. The scent of oil and sweat grows stronger as you step into the armory. The room is lined with racks of weapons and armor, each piece polished until it glints in the sunlight streaming from the narrow windows above. The temperature feels cooler here, the air dry and heavy with the faint tang of iron. At first glance, the armory feels imposing, almost sacred. Rows of chainmail hang from wooden pegs like shimmering waterfalls of metal. Helmets rest on stands, their visors shaped like the faces of silent sentinels. You reach out and touch one. It is heavier than you expect, cold against your fingertips, as though it still remembers the battles it was made for. A man with strong arms and a calm expression nods as you enter. He is the master-at-arms, responsible for every blade, shield, and spear inside these walls. His job is both practical and ceremonial. He oversees repairs, maintains weapons, and trains the castle's guards. The way he moves tells you that this work is more than duty, it is devotion. According to surviving inventories from medieval estates, some castles held thousands of weapons in storage, all catalogued and cared for as carefully as the silver in the Lord's treasury. Iron was wealth. A single sword could take weeks to forge, shaped in the heat of a charcoal fire and cooled in oil or water. Each one was unique, a fingerprint of its maker. The master-at-arms gestures for you to follow him. You walk past a rack of crossbows, their strings gleaming with wax. He explains that maintaining them is a delicate art. A single flaw could mean disaster. He picks one up, checks the tension, then smiles faintly with satisfaction. The sound of the cord twanging softly when he tests it fills the room like a whisper of thunder. Nearby, a group of young squires polish armor, their hands blackened with soot and oil. One hums a tune under his breath as he works, the rhythm steady and meditative. Another tests the weight of a breastplate and nearly topples backward, earning laughter from his companions. Despite the clatter of metal, the mood feels light, almost playful. Curiously, some chronicles mention that armorers were among the most respected craftsmen in medieval society. Their knowledge combined artistry with science, precision with instinct. They understood heat, pressure, and geometry, long before those words were formalized. A perfectly fitted suit of armor could mean the difference between life and death, and their skill was treated with reverence. You run your hand along a long sword resting on a rack. Its surface shines like a mirror. The handle is wrapped in dark leather, worn smooth by use. When you lift it slightly, you can feel the balance surprisingly light for its size, almost graceful. The master-at-arms watches you approvingly. He tells you that a good sword is like a good friend, steady, reliable, and honest. Some modern researchers note that training in the castle was less about constant combat and more about discipline. Fencing, archery, and mounted drills taught focus, not just aggression. A well-trained knight was as much a symbol of control as of strength. You can sense that in the way the squires move, each swing and stance deliberate, practiced, elegant. In a corner, a young boy polishes a row of shields. Each bears a coat of arms, painted in vivid color gold lions, red crosses, black eagles. The paint is chipped in places, revealing wood beneath. He looks up and grins, showing a gap where one tooth is missing. The innocence in his smile contrasts with the tools of war surrounding him. Childhood and battle live side by side here, bound by routine. One squire asks a question about the best way to deflect a blow from a halberd. The master-at-arms demonstrates with slow precision, explaining how the angle of movement determines survival. His voice is calm, patient, but you sense an underlying intensity, like an old soldier teaching not just technique, but memory. Perhaps he has seen what steel can do. There's an ongoing discussion among historians about how often knights truly trained. Some claim it was daily, an essential part of discipline. Others argue that many noblemen were less consistent, relying more on reputation than skill. Standing here, you can almost imagine both truths coexisting. Some train with passion, others with pretense, but all are bound by the expectation of readiness. A faint scent of oil and charcoal drifts from a forge in the adjoining room. The rhythmic pounding of a hammer echoes faintly through the wall. You step closer and catch a glimpse of sparks flying as a blacksmith shapes a new blade. The glow of the fire bathes his face in orange light, highlighting the concentration in his eyes. It's mesmerizing, watching him strike with such precision. Oddly enough, one 15th century manual recommended rubbing weapons with bacon fat to prevent rust, claiming it gave them both shine and scent. The master-at-arms laughs softly when you mention it, saying he prefers oil and wax instead. Still, you can imagine how the smell of cured meat might have mixed with iron in these halls. The lesson ends as the squires finish polishing and begin to hang the armor back on its stands. The light from the window catches the metal, filling the room with reflections that shimmer like liquid. For a moment, it feels like standing inside a river made of steel. The master-at-arms wipes his hands, nods toward the doorway, and tells you the knights will soon gather in the courtyard for their drills. You thank him and step outside. The shift from shadow to sunlight feels blinding at first. The courtyard hums again with movement, but your senses still carry the weight of that metallic world. You can almost hear the lingering echo of the hammer and the quiet hum of discipline that rules the armory. Somewhere beyond the yard, a softer sound rises voices, laughter, perhaps music. Not everything in the castle is work or weaponry. There are letters, glances, and secrets written in ink instead of blood. You follow the sound, curious to see how affection and formality blend in this world of stone and steel. You follow the sound of laughter and low conversation into a quieter corridor that leads toward a small chamber overlooking the courtyard. The light here is softer, filtered through sheets of oiled parchment instead of glass. It paints everything in a golden haze. A few candles flicker despite the daylight, their wax running down in lazy drips. You can smell ink, perfume, and the faint sweetness of dried rose petals. This is the world of letters and longing, where words replace swords and glances carry more risk than open battle. You pause by the doorway, watching two figures seated at a writing desk. One is a young woman dressed in pale blue, her hair braided neatly beneath a thin veil. The other, a man in a simple tunic, dips a quill into ink and scratches careful lines onto parchment. Every motion is deliberate, as though the act of writing itself were a secret ritual. Courtly love, they called it, a dance of restraint and imagination that unfolded in letters, glances, and carefully chosen words. Many chroniclers of the era describe it as a game of honor more than passion, a way to express feeling without ever crossing the line of propriety. In the age of castles, love was often as carefully constructed as the stone walls themselves. You watch the man pause and look up at her. His eyes hold a mix of hope and caution. She smiles slightly, just enough to be noticed. The quill moves again. The letter will likely speak of loyalty, admiration, maybe even service, but never lust. In a society where marriage was a matter of politics, affection had to find its own secret language. A small harp rests nearby, its strings catching the light. The woman plucks one softly, testing its tune. The sound shimmers through the air like a sigh. Music and poetry often accompanied these exchanges, each line a coded message. Some modern scholars suggest that such rituals allowed people to express genuine emotion in a world that left little room for personal choice. Others argue it was all theatre, a polite mask for ambition. Perhaps it was both. On a nearby table lies a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. The wax seals are marked with tiny symbols: hearts, ivy leaves, stars. The scent of beeswax and lavender rises as you lean closer. Curiously, many nobles kept their love letters even after marriage, storing them alongside family documents. Some were burned at death, others hidden behind false panels or tucked into prayer books. Love left its trace even where it was forbidden to exist. You pick up a sheet that has been discarded. The ink is fresh, the handwriting delicate. The words speak of courage and patience, comparing affection to sunlight piercing through armor. It is both tender and precise. You can feel the balance between desire and duty in every phrase. The language is formal, almost distant, yet the emotion behind it pulses like a heartbeat. In one corner, a young servant girl stitches embroidery into a piece of linen, pretending not to listen. Her needle moves quickly, tracing vines and flowers in colored thread, but her ears catch every whispered word. Later, she will tell her friends what she heard, her story growing with each retelling. Secrets in castles have never stayed secret for long. According to household records, letter writing was one of the most important skills taught to noble women. A beautifully composed letter could win favor, heal conflict, or quietly challenge a rival. Quills, parchment, and ink were as valuable as jewels, stored carefully and used sparingly. The ink itself often carried perfume, made with crushed violets or myrrh. Every detail mattered. There's continuing disagreement among historians about whether these relationships were truly romantic or merely symbolic. Some letters read like genuine confessions of affection, while others resemble performances of virtue. You imagine both kinds coexisting, just as hearts do, half sincerity, half strategy. The woman at the desk folds her letter and seals it with red wax. She presses her ring into it, leaving an impression shaped like a lily. The messenger who will carry it waits silently by the door, his expression neutral. He knows better than to ask questions. Letters can be as dangerous as blades. A curious fact from one surviving manual of manners says that when receiving a love letter, a lady was expected to let it rest unopened for a short while before reading. The gesture symbolized modesty, a way of showing that her heart did not rush too quickly. You smile at the subtlety of it, how even time could be turned into etiquette. The lady rises and crosses to the window. The wind lifts her veil slightly, revealing her profile against the light. She looks out across the courtyard where knights are training. Perhaps her letter is meant for one of them. Her fingers rest lightly on the windowsill, and for a moment, she seems lost in thought. You can almost feel the ache of longing in the stillness. Behind her, the man tidies his ink and parchment. He wipes the table clean, his movements neat and controlled. Whatever passed between them will live only in the letter now. Soon it will travel beyond the castle walls, carried by a rider whose horse's hooves will drum the rhythm of secrecy along the road. Oddly enough, one story from 14th century France tells of a noblewoman who sent her lover's letter hidden inside a loaf of bread to avoid suspicion. When discovered, the baker claimed it was a recipe. The cleverness of love has always found ways to survive. The servant girl finishes her embroidery and lays it aside. The pattern glows in the light, a single vine climbing around a heart. You suspect it is not just decoration. Perhaps it's a private echo of the words spoken here. The embroidery will hang in a hallway or a solar, a quiet reminder of the day's unspoken feelings. The chamber grows quieter as the lady leaves. The faint scent of rosewater lingers in the air, mingling with wax and parchment. You stand there a moment longer, feeling the hush settle again. Outside, the clanging of weapons fades, replaced by the soft murmur of footsteps and the smell of food drifting from the kitchens below. Love and duty, steel and parchment, all share the same walls. The castle is full of contrasts, and somehow they coexist in perfect balance. You turn toward the stairway, following the aroma of roasting meat and fresh bread. The next story waits where the heat of the hearth replaces the heat of longing, and where life becomes deliciously noisy once more. You descend a spiral staircase that grows warmer with every step. The scent hits you first, rich and heavy, a mix of roasted meat, melting fat, and fresh herbs. You step into the kitchen, and the world erupts into motion. Flames leap from the great hearth, pots bubble over glowing embers, and the clang of iron pans rings like a strange kind of music. It is chaos, but it is also a masterpiece of rhythm and order. The kitchen is the castle's true engine, a place where survival meets creativity. Servants move with practiced grace, ducking and turning between benches, carrying platters, stirring sauces, chopping vegetables. It feels like a dance without music, every step perfectly timed. The air shimmers with heat. Near the main hearth, a cook with a flour-dusted apron is turning a spit over the fire. A whole boar, golden and glistening, rotates slowly while drippings hiss into the embers. The smell fills the room until you can almost taste it. She waves her hand through the smoke and smiles, her face shining with sweat. She tells you that the Lord has guests tonight, so the feast must be worthy of song. According to surviving kitchen accounts, castle cooks were often among the highest paid servants, their skill regarded as a mark of prestige. Food was not only nourishment but also theatre. To feed a noble household meant commanding respect. Some modern scholars even compare them to artists, balancing flavors and presentation in ways that hinted at both science and ceremony. You wander closer to a long wooden table, where two apprentices knead dough with strong, steady hands. The flour floats around them like a fine mist, softening the heat of the fire. They laugh as they work, arguing about whose loaf will rise higher. One of them traces a cross on the top of his dough, whispering a quick blessing. Bread here is sacred, part prayer and part meal. A pot nearby simmers with what looks like soup, though the scent is more complex: meat, leeks, garlic, and a hint of wine. The cook dips a ladle, tastes, and frowns slightly before tossing in a pinch of something green, parsley maybe, or mint. She mutters that it needs freshness, and hands the ladle to an assistant for stirring. Even here, surrounded by stone and fire, there is artistry. Curiously enough, one English recipe from the 14th century describes white soup made with almond milk, sugar, and chicken broth. It sounds surprisingly elegant, almost modern. The medieval palate loved contrast, sweet with savory, spice with salt. Food was meant to surprise, not simply satisfy. The noise in the kitchen swells and softens like waves. Someone chops onions with swift precision, the blade flashing in the light. Another servant grinds spices with a mortar and pestle, the scent of pepper and cinnamon filling the air. Exotic ingredients like these traveled great distances, Venice, Alexandria, maybe even India. To serve them was to declare the castle's wealth. A curious entry in an old merchant's ledger lists saffron at a price higher than gold by weight. Its threads glowed bright yellow in broth and pudding, turning even humble grain into a sign of luxury. You can see a small jar of it now on a shelf, half empty, its color vivid against the dull grey stone. One young boy tends the scullery, washing piles of dishes in a trough of cloudy water. His face is serious, his hands red from scrubbing. He tells you softly that he dreams of becoming a cook one day. You nod, thinking that every master in this place once began with calloused fingers and cold water. There's some disagreement among culinary historians about whether medieval food was bland or boldly seasoned. Many early writers mocked the idea that spices could mask spoiled meat, claiming it was a myth. More recent research suggests something different. People simply loved intense flavors, much like we do today. It wasn't decay they were hiding, but monotony. At the back of the room, a small window lets in a sliver of light. You catch sight of a gardener carrying a basket of fresh herbs inside thyme, sage, and sorrel, their leaves still wet with dew. The cook thanks him and scatters a few onto a plate with a sigh of approval. The connection between field and fire feels immediate, alive. A small piglet squeals in a pen near the door, destined for tomorrow's meal. The cook sighs and pats its head affectionately. "Not today," she murmurs. Compassion exists here, even in a place built on survival. You sense it in the way people handle the food, with respect rather than haste. Somewhere above, faint bells ring to mark the hour. The sound reaches the kitchen like a reminder that time itself must be fed. The servants quicken their pace. Platters are wiped clean, spices tucked away, bread turned from the oven, golden and fragrant. Steam swirls like a living thing, wrapping the room in warmth. Oddly, one French chronicler once wrote that a nobleman's kitchen could reveal more about his soul than his chapel. A clean kitchen meant order and virtue. A noisy one meant generosity. A smoky one meant passion. Looking around, you suspect this one contains all three. You taste a drop of sauce from a wooden spoon offered by the cook. It burns your tongue slightly with spice, then melts into sweetness. She watches your face and laughs when you nod in approval. "Perfect," she says, and claps her hands for the next dish. As you step back, the sound of the kitchen wraps around you completely. The chopping, the sizzling, the laughter, the soft murmur of prayers said under breath. This is not chaos. It is harmony in motion. The castle might wear its armor above, but down here, it sings. When you leave, the smell of roasting and herbs follows you like a trail. The corridor feels colder after the heat of the hearth, but your senses are alive, full of flavor. Somewhere nearby, candles are being lit for the midday meal, and you can already imagine the echo of voices gathering to eat. The castle prepares to feast, and you, drawn by the promise of warmth and sound, follow the aroma into the great hall once again, where the rhythm of life continues in flickering light. The great hall glows with golden light as you return, the air thick with the scent of freshly baked bread and roasted meat. The long tables are being arranged, and servants move with quick, measured steps, setting out trenchers, cups, and pitchers. You feel the faint vibration of footsteps through the stone floor as the hum of voices grows louder. The meal is nearly ready, and the castle holds its breath in anticipation. You take a seat near the far end of the table, close enough to observe but not to intrude. The room feels transformed from the calm of morning. Banners hang from the beams, their colors bright in the shifting light of the hearth. The noise is a soft chaos, cutlery clinking, laughter bubbling, the low murmur of conversation that rises and falls like the tide. According to records kept by medieval stewards, the midday meal, called dinner, was the true centerpiece of the day. It began around noon and could last for hours. It was more than sustenance. It was ceremony. To eat together was to affirm the order of the world, with each person in their rightful place. You notice how carefully that order is arranged. The Lord sits at the high table, elevated slightly on a wooden platform so all may see him. His wife sits beside him, her gown shimmering in the light, her posture elegant but relaxed. Below them, the household is arranged by rank knights first, then squires, clerks, and finally the servants who will eat last after everyone else has had their fill. Even food becomes a reflection of hierarchy. The first dishes arrive: platters of roasted venison, bowls of stewed vegetables, trenchers piled with thick slices of bread. The scent of spice and smoke fills the air. The servants move like dancers, weaving between benches, refilling cups, clearing crumbs. The rhythm is precise, almost invisible. You dip a piece of bread into a bowl of sauce made with wine and almonds. It is rich but not overwhelming, the kind of flavor that lingers softly on the tongue. Across the table, someone sprinkles salt onto their meal, a gesture that still carries power. In this age, salt is a treasure, stored under lock and key. Its presence at every table marks this castle as prosperous. Curiously, many medieval cooks liked to mix sweetness and meat, honey with venison, raisins with fish, sugar with eggs. Some historians believe this came from contact with trade routes that stretched deep into the Middle East, where spices and sugar were prized. To taste sweetness in a meal was to taste the reach of the world. A boy carries a pitcher of wine and pours it carefully into silver cups. The wine is dark, with a hint of vinegar and spice. You raise your cup and take a sip. It warms your chest almost immediately. A knight nearby tells a story about a hunt gone wrong, how a boar once chased his horse into a pond. The laughter that follows is loud and genuine, echoing off the stone walls until even the servants smile. There is a strange peace in this noise. No one rushes. No one checks clocks. Meals here are both indulgence and anchor. To eat slowly is to live fully, to mark the passing of time through comfort. Some modern researchers suggest that the Great Hall meal was also a way to display wealth indirectly. The more servants attending, the more candles burning, the grander the impression. Even the arrangement of dishes had meaning. A roast set in the center declared generosity. Smaller plates along the edges whispered thrift and care. You notice a platter of bright orange carrots glistening beside a dish of fish. The combination looks beautiful, though you recall that in this period, carrots were often purple or white. The cook must have found a rare batch of the newer kind. Each color, each spice, is a quiet luxury. At the high table, the lady of the castle breaks her bread first. She dips it into broth, then gestures for her steward to begin serving the next course. It is a subtle signal, understood without words. Etiquette here is as structured as music, each motion in harmony with the next. The second course arrives. Roasted birds with herbs, platters of cheese, bowls of fruit preserved in honey. The scent of cinnamon drifts across the hall, blending with the smoke from torches. You close your eyes for a moment and let it sink in the warmth, the flavor, the steady hum of human voices. Curiously, one set of household rules from a 15th century English manor lists the exact behavior expected at table. No elbows on the board, no slurping, and absolutely no scratching in company. The rules feel strict but also tender, as if trying to shape civilization out of appetite. The servants move efficiently, clearing bones and crumbs with wooden scrapers. One drops a spoon, freezes, and then quickly retrieves it. The lord chuckles and waves him on, forgiving the mistake. For a brief moment, rank softens into shared humanity. There is a custom here that surprises you. Before the final course, a servant carries a bowl of rose water around the table for hand washing. The scent is delicate, cleansing. You dip your fingers in, feeling the coolness against your skin, and dry them on a fine linen cloth. It is a small, almost sacred pause before the meal's end. A dish of sugared almonds appears last, glittering like jewels. The sweetness is intense, a signal that the meal is done. Conversation drifts into storytelling. Someone begins to sing softly, a ballad about a knight who loved the moon. The tune winds upward, haunting and beautiful. There is still debate among historians about how often people in castles actually feasted like this. Some argue it was a rare extravagance. Others that even ordinary days carried touches of grandeur. Perhaps both are true. What matters now is the feeling that fills this space. Warmth, gratitude, and the gentle glow of satisfaction. As the servants clear the last dishes, the fire crackles softly. The lord rises, nods to his guests, and leaves for the solar where the afternoon will unfold more quietly. The hall begins to empty, but its warmth remains. You sit for a moment longer, savoring the aftertaste of spice and smoke. The echoes fade slowly, replaced by the distant sound of voices upstairs. Somewhere beyond these walls, the women of the castle gather in a brighter, quieter room. Their laughter drifts faintly through the stone. You rise, following that sound, ready to glimpse another side of life within these walls, one made not of armor and fire, but of fabric, patience, and sunlight. You climb a staircase that curves gently upward toward the upper chambers, where the air grows warmer and softer. The sound of the great hall fades behind you, replaced by something more delicate, the whisper of women's voices, the faint scrape of thread against fabric, the quiet hum of contentment. You reach a wooden door slightly ajar and step into a room filled with sunlight. This is the solar, the private heart of the castle. The first thing you notice is the light. It streams through the narrow windows, spilling across embroidered cushions, polished wood, and tapestries that shimmer with the stories of saints and seasons. The air smells faintly of beeswax and lavender, the scent of calm. A small fire burns low in the hearth, not for cooking but for comfort. Here, the noise of the castle fades into silence, replaced by the steady rhythm of domestic creation. The women of the household sit in a loose circle. Some sew, others write, one plucks the strings of a small harp with absent-minded grace. Their laughter rises and falls like birdsong. You realize how rare this space must feel to them, a moment of peace within the stone labyrinth of duty. A young woman is embroidering a length of silk stretched across a wooden frame. Tiny gold threads catch the sunlight, turning her work into something almost alive. She looks up and smiles when you greet her. Her fingers never stop moving. She tells you that the pattern she is stitching depicts vines and sparrows, symbols of loyalty and renewal. Many surviving examples of medieval embroidery reveal similar imagery, showing how art often doubled as prayer. Each stitch is a quiet act of devotion. Near her, another woman reads aloud from a small book written in Latin. Her voice is soft and clear, though the words are ancient and unfamiliar. Some modern historians believe that noble women were among the most educated members of medieval society, trained not just in piety, but in poetry, music, and medicine. The solar was their schoolroom and sanctuary. You move closer to the window where a basket of yarn sits beside a spindle. The colors are vivid, deep crimson, moss green, indigo blue. The dyes come from plants, roots, and insects. The woman's spinning thread tells you that the red dye comes from crushed beetles brought from distant lands. She laughs when you flinch slightly. Beauty has strange beginnings, she says, and goes back to her work. A small dog sleeps at her feet, twitching occasionally as if dreaming of chasing rabbits. Its fur has been brushed until it shines. Dogs like this, lapdogs bred for companionship, appear often in portraits of noble women. They were living symbols of affection and refinement. You glance around the solar, noticing the details that make it more intimate than the grand chambers below. Cushions are piled in corners, a lute rests on a stool, and above the hearth hangs a simple cross carved from oak. The room feels alive, shaped by warmth and personality. One of the older women looks up from her embroidery and offers you a piece of fruit preserved in honey. The sweetness melts on your tongue, soft and perfumed. She tells you that the lady of the house grows roses in pots by the window and uses the petals to make syrup. It is said to cure sadness. The gesture feels gentle, almost maternal. Curiously, a few household records mention that the solar was sometimes used for secret correspondence and political planning. Behind the comfort of cushions and lace, decisions about alliances, marriages, and estates were quietly shaped. Power, in this space, wears perfume and smiles instead of armor. A young girl, perhaps 12 or 13, practices her needlework beside her mother. Her stitches are uneven, but her concentration fierce. She glances at you shyly, then looks back at her work. In this world, a girl learns patience before anything else. Her future will be sewn thread by thread, steady and silent. Some scholars continue to discuss whether noble women found freedom or confinement within castle walls. Some argue that they wielded influence through education and diplomacy, others that they lived in gilded isolation. Watching these women, you sense a mixture of both. Their world is limited, but within those limits, they have carved a haven of purpose and grace. In a corner, one woman plays softly on the harp, her melody curling through the air like smoke. It mingles with the whisper of fabric and the occasional laugh. The sound is tender, ancient, and soothing. It feels less like performance and more like memory. Oddly, one French chronicler wrote that ladies of noble birth often perfumed their sewing threads with ambergris so that their embroidery would retain its fragrance even years later. You can almost imagine it. Tapestries that smell faintly of the sea and distant shores. The lady of the castle enters then, her presence bringing the faint rustle of silk and the quiet hush of respect. She greets each woman with warmth, examining their work, offering small words of praise. When she reaches the window, she pauses to look outside. Her eyes linger on the courtyard below where the men are training, A thoughtful smile touches her lips. You realize that life here, though divided by space and duty, still runs in parallel rhythms. She sits beside you and begins to sort through a box of letters, each tied with ribbon. Some are written by her husband, others by friends at neighboring estates. A few bear seals from distant lands. She tells you that sometimes the letters bring news, sometimes poetry, and sometimes just comfort. In a world of walls, words are a kind of window. The room grows quieter as the sun begins to tilt westward. The light fades from gold to amber, and the fire pops softly. One by one, the women put away their work, folding cloth and closing books. The music fades to a single lingering note. For a moment, everything feels suspended. You realize how much life happens in these small, quiet rooms, the kind of life that rarely makes it into chronicles. The laughter, the learning, the shared understanding that history often overlooks. As you rise to leave, the lady smiles and says softly, "Peace lives in the hands, not just in prayers." Her words linger long after you step into the corridor. Outside, the sounds of movement return. Footsteps, voices, and the creak of a door below. The day continues, and so does the rhythm of duty. Somewhere nearby, papers rustle, and you catch the faint scent of ink. The Lord's counsel must be gathering. The castle shifts again from the intimacy of the solar to the business of power. You follow the sound of footsteps and muffled conversation down a long corridor that smells faintly of ink, wax, and parchment. The walls are lined with narrow slits of light, and the air feels cooler here, steadier, as if the stones themselves are listening. Ahead, a heavy wooden door stands open, revealing the chamber where the lord of the castle works. It is quieter than the great hall, but no less alive. Inside, the atmosphere is one of concentration. Scrolls and ledgers lie spread across a long table. A single candle burns beside them, its wax pooled like melted ivory. The air carries the scent of parchment and old ink, a sharp tang that reminds you how knowledge once had weight. The walls are hung with maps and documents sealed with ribbons. In this room, power is not shouted, it is written. The Lord sits at the table, quill in hand, head bent over a letter. His fingers are stained black from ink, his brow furrowed in thought. Beside him, a clerk reads aloud from a ledger, his voice precise and calm. They are discussing rents, repairs, and harvest. Yields the invisible heartbeat of the castle. You realize that this, more than any feast or battle, is the true labor of nobility, the careful balancing of lives, land, and loyalty. According to surviving estate records, medieval lords often spent hours each day reviewing accounts. They managed not just their castle but entire villages and farms beyond the walls. Every penny of rent, every grain of wheat, every broken tool was noted. Paperwork might seem dull, but it held the realm together. The pen was as mighty as the sword, though it drew slower blood. You move closer to observe a parchment covered in flowing script. The handwriting is elegant, looping, and deliberate. The clerk pauses to melt wax for a seal. The scent is sweet and smoky. He presses the Lord's signet ring into the soft red pool, leaving behind a crest shaped like a lion surrounded by ivy. It hardens quickly, catching the candlelight like polished stone. Curiously enough, historians have found that some lords were illiterate, relying entirely on clerks to translate both words and intent. Others prided themselves on education, studying Latin or even philosophy. This lord seems to belong to the latter group. You can see it in the way he studies each word, refusing to let any detail escape him. The steward enters quietly with a bundle of papers tied with twine. He bows, then begins to report on supplies, the stores of grain, the repairs to the outer wall, the wages due to the grooms. His tone is brisk, efficient. The Lord listens, occasionally nodding, occasionally frowning. Decisions are made quickly. A broken wheel will be fixed before dusk. The carpenter will be paid in salt, not coin. Everything here runs on rhythm, not impulse. A small boy hovers in the doorway, holding a tray of fresh candles. He waits patiently until the clerk gestures for him to approach. The boy replaces the burned candle with a new one, his hands steady despite the heat. He bows and leaves without a word. Even this small act is part of the machinery of order. Some modern researchers suggest that governance in medieval castles was closer to a business than a monarchy. Every choice, how much ale to brew, how many sheep to shear, was tied to economics. Behind the romance of banners and armor lived a world of math and memory. You begin to understand how survival here depended not on glory, but on ledgers. In a corner of the room, a chest sits half open, filled with coins, measuring weights, and small pouches of wax. The sight feels both humble and symbolic. Each coin glints faintly in the light, as though reflecting not wealth but the effort it represents. The clerk glances at it and makes another note in his ledger, his quill scratching softly like a heartbeat. There is some disagreement among scholars about how much control noblewomen had over such affairs. Some claim they merely signed where told, others that they actively managed estates when their husbands were away at war. You imagine the lady from the Solar sitting here in her husband's absence, reading these same ledgers by firelight, her face calm but determined. Power often wears quiet clothes. Oddly, a few preserved letters from the 14th century reveal a surprising tenderness within these dry documents. Lords sometimes included lines of concern for their servants' health or blessings for their families. Between the numbers and formalities, a trace of humanity lingers. Perhaps even rulers needed to remind themselves that behind every figure was a life. The clerk finishes reading and places the last scroll in a box lined with velvet. The lord leans back, stretching his shoulders, and glances toward the window. The afternoon sun slants across his face, making him look older, thoughtful. He stands and walks to the small balcony that overlooks the courtyard. From here, he can see everything: the soldiers training, the maids hanging linen, the smoke rising from the kitchens. His gaze softens. He rules not a kingdom of grandeur, but of motion and effort. He calls for his messenger, a tall man in a brown cloak, who steps forward to receive the sealed letter. It will go to a neighboring baron, perhaps an ally, perhaps a rival. The messenger tucks it into his belt, bows, and departs without delay. The door closes behind him, leaving the room still again. The steward clears his throat and quietly reminds his lord that the children will soon begin their lessons. The lord smiles faintly, sets aside his quill, and says he will join them shortly. There is warmth in his tone, the kind that belongs to both duty and affection. You look around one last time at the papers, the ink, the candles burning low. It feels like standing inside a mind made visible, where thought becomes tangible, where every decision has a scent and sound. This room, in its quiet way, holds the castle together. As you leave, you hear the faint rustle of parchment and the steady scratching of the quill beginning again. Governance never truly ends. It only pauses for breath. Outside, the air feels lighter, carrying the laughter of children from a nearby chamber. You follow it, curious to see how lessons are taught within these old stone walls, where learning feels like both inheritance and hope. You follow the sound of laughter and high, clear voices down a narrow hallway lined with tapestries that sway gently in the draught. The stone here feels smoother, worn by the touch of small hands over generations. The light brightens as you near an open door. Inside, a room hums with energy. Children's voices mix with the scratch of quills, the rustle of parchment, and the occasional creak of a wooden stool. This is the castle's schoolroom, where the next generation learns the language of both power and patience. A fire burns in the hearth, throwing a soft glow over the faces of 3 children sitting at a long table. Their cheeks are pink from warmth, and their eyes bright with curiosity. At the far end sits the tutor, an elderly man with kind eyes and ink-stained fingers. He holds a rolled parchment in one hand and a feather quill in the other. You step inside quietly, careful not to disturb them. The room smells of wax and dust, of ink and wool. On a small shelf, wooden tablets lean against each other, their surfaces covered in wax for practicing letters. The children are repeating words aloud, the sound rhythmic and musical. The tutor nods approvingly, his voice low and steady, guiding them through the Latin alphabet. According to surviving manuals of instruction, noble children in medieval castles were taught Latin, French, and sometimes a little music or astronomy. Boys learned the art of diplomacy and war, while girls were trained in household management, music, and virtue. Learning was not just about knowledge, but about preparing to uphold the delicate balance of order. A boy with tousled hair frowns as he struggles to form a letter correctly. His sister beside him leans over and helps, whispering the shape into his ear like a secret spell. He smiles, grateful, and tries again. Their tutor watches in silence, pride flickering in his expression. Patience is his greatest lesson. On a nearby bench, a younger child plays with a carved wooden horse, trotting it across the table. His nursemaid scolds him softly, then scoops him into her lap and tells him a story instead. Her voice is soothing, her words full of magic and beasts, knights and dragons. The boy's eyes widen. Storytelling here is more than entertainment. It is education wrapped in wonder. Curiously enough, records from noble households show that storytelling was often a tool for teaching morality and memory. Tales were a kind of living library, passed from one generation to the next. Long before books were common, a good story carried wisdom more effectively than ink. The tutor finishes the lesson in Latin and turns to a map pinned to the wall. It shows a patchwork of kingdoms drawn in shaky lines, the seas dotted with creatures of imagination, serpents, whales, and winged fish. The children gather closer, tracing rivers and mountains with their fingers. The tutor explains where pilgrims travel, where merchants sail, where danger waits. To learn geography here is to learn awe. There is some disagreement among historians about how formal these lessons truly were. Some believe tutors followed strict schedules and curricula. Others think the days were shaped by the rhythm of the castle itself, lessons interrupted by hunts, visits, or celebrations. Standing here, you suspect the truth lies in between. Discipline exists, but so does kindness. The boy with the wooden horse asks why the world looks so strange on the map. The tutor chuckles and replies that no one has seen all of it, so they draw it as best they can. Even the unknown has shape, he says softly. His words seem to hang in the warm air like a gentle truth. A small table in the corner holds musical instruments, a tiny lute, a recorder, and a drum. The tutor allows the eldest girl to pick up the lute and pluck a few notes. The melody is hesitant but lovely. Music lessons were as important as reading, for they taught rhythm and memory. Her fingers move slowly at first, then more confidently. The sound fills the room, delicate as sunlight through stained glass. Oddly, one letter from a 14th century tutor mentions that children were sometimes rewarded for good behavior with sweets made from honey and nuts, but punished for disobedience by copying prayers until their hands cramped. The balance between kindness and correction shaped both mind and spirit. The tutor closes his book and smiles at his pupils. "Enough for today," he says. "You have learned letters, numbers, and patience. Now go and learn the world." The children bow politely before scattering toward the door. Their laughter spills into the corridor, echoing down the stairs like a flock of birds. When the room grows quiet, you linger a moment. The faint scratching of quills has stopped, but the warmth remains. On the table, the boy's forgotten wooden horse lies beside an open book, its carved hooves resting on a Latin phrase about virtue. The pairing feels perfect, childhood and knowledge meeting by accident. Some modern researchers suggest that medieval education was not as rigid as we imagine. It blended learning with living, blending rules with curiosity. Looking around this room, you can see how easily knowledge would weave itself into daily life, through song, through chores, through the stories whispered by firelight. The tutor tidies the books and gazes out the window toward the courtyard below. Children's laughter drifts back to him, and he smiles. His role is not glorious. but it is sacred in its quiet way. He shapes the future not through power, but through patience. As you step outside, you can still hear that faint laughter, mixing with the shouts of men training below. The castle's layers of life blend seamlessly, warriors, servants, scholars, and children, all sharing the same air. Each generation inherits the same rhythm, the same walls, and the same sunlight falling through narrow windows. You walk toward the stairs that lead back to the courtyard. The smell of hay and the cry of animals reach you before you see them. It is time to meet the castle's other inhabitants, the ones with fur, feathers, and wings, whose presence adds life and sound to every day within these walls. You step back into the courtyard, blinking against the sudden brightness. The sounds return all at once: hooves striking stone, dogs barking, chickens clucking, and the low murmur of voices that fill the open air. The world of stone and silk gives way to something wilder, warmer, and more alive. Here, animals are everywhere, part of the castle's rhythm as much as its people. The first creature to greet you is a large brown horse, tethered near the stable door. It flicks its tail impatiently, stamping a hoof as a stable boy brushes dust from its flank. The smell of hay and leather fills the air. Horses are more than transportation here. They are status, companions, even symbols of pride. Every hoofprint carries the weight of rank. Records from medieval accounts show that castles often housed dozens of horses, destriers for battle, palfreys for ladies, sturdy pack horses for travel, and smaller ponies for errands. Each had a groom who knew its moods and needs. The bond between horse and handler was personal, quiet, and enduring. The stable was a place of both noise and tenderness. You walk inside and find rows of stalls, each lined with straw. The horses snort softly as you pass, their eyes dark and curious. A groom pours oats into a wooden trough, humming an old tune about knights and luck. He tells you that some horses are fed honey mixed with ale before long rides to keep their strength. It sounds extravagant, but he swears by it. A cat darts between the stalls, tail held high, chasing something unseen. Cats were treasured in castles, not for affection but for their usefulness. They kept the granaries safe from mice and the kitchens free of rats. Yet over time, they earned affection too. This one pauses near your feet, blinks, and lets you scratch its chin before slipping away again. Outside, the courtyard opens toward a fenced area where geese waddle and honk with indignant authority. Their noise echoes off the stone. Geese are both guardians and dinner. People once believed that their cries could warn of intruders better than any watchman. You smile, thinking that perhaps they are the castle's truest sentinels. A boy scatters grain for the birds. His laughter mingles with their clamour. A few hens flutter around his feet, their feathers catching the sunlight. Chickens provided eggs, feathers, and meat, but also a kind of comfort. Their presence makes the hard walls of the castle feel more like home. In the distance, you hear the cry of a hawk. You look up to see a falconer standing on the battlements, a leather glove stretched before him. A sleek bird perches on his wrist, its feathers glossy, its gaze fierce. He whistles softly, and the hawk takes flight, circling high above the courtyard before diving toward the fields beyond the wall. Curiously enough, falconry was not just a pastime, but a display of mastery and grace. Training a bird of prey required patience and precision. Many noble families measured their refinement by the skill of their falconers. The relationship between bird and handler was one of trust, formed through hours of silent understanding. Near the well, two dogs chase each other in circles, tongues lolling, tails wagging. Their coats are glossy, their collars trimmed with metal studs. Hunting dogs like these were raised from birth alongside their masters, trained to obey by whistle and gesture. A smaller dog, no larger than a loaf of bread, watches from a nearby step, yawning. It is probably the lady's companion, more ornament than hunter. You pause to take it all in. The flutter of wings, the ring of hooves, the hiss of the forge not far away. Every sound belongs. Even the smell of manure, sharp and earthy, feels oddly grounding. It is the scent of life in motion, unfiltered and real. Some modern researchers have pointed out that animals were rarely viewed as mere beasts during this period. They carried meaning. A falcon symbolized nobility, a dog loyalty, a horse courage. Even pigs, often mocked in later tales, were seen as essential providers, turning waste into sustenance. The medieval castle was as much a living farm as a fortress. A stable boy shows you the harness room, where saddles, bridles, and ropes hang neatly from pegs. The leather is dark from oil, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and hide. He explains how each piece is cleaned daily, every buckle checked for wear. A broken strap could mean disaster on the road. Attention to detail is survival here. There's an old superstition he mentions too. Before a journey, riders would whisper into a horse's ear to ensure safe passage. Some said the animal could carry prayers faster than a priest. He grins, half serious, half teasing, and pats the horse's neck. They listen better than people, he says. There is still debate among historians about whether castle animals were kept mainly for work or affection. Evidence suggests both. Many accounts tell of lords mourning favourite hunting dogs or naming prized hawks as if they were family. Love, it seems, found its way even into the stables. Oddly, one fragment of a medieval household poem describes a cat being buried with a small silver bell tied around its neck, so it might wake when heaven calls. The image is tender, proof that the boundary between human and animal affection was never as clear as we imagine. You leave the stables and walk toward the edge of the courtyard where sunlight spills through the open gate. A shepherd passes, leading a pair of sheep for shearing. Their fleece is thick and soft, the colour of clouds. He nods to you politely, the sound of his shears faint against the hum of the day. Wool from these very sheep will likely become fine tunics or the tapestry threads you saw upstairs. The circle of life here is practical, but also poetic. As you turn back toward the inner yard, you notice the falconer returning, the hawk perched once again on his wrist. The bird's feathers glint like polished bronze. He bows slightly, murmuring a phrase you cannot quite catch. You realize it is not a command but a thank you. You pause for a moment, feeling the strange peace that fills this courtyard of beasts and humans living side by side. The castle, for all its stone and ceremony, is alive because of them, the horses that thunder through its gates, the cats that keep its corners clean, the birds that carry its spirit to the sky. Above you, a bell begins to ring, slow and deep. It is the sound that marks the next passage of the day. From the chapel tower, the notes drift across the courtyard, wrapping everything people, animals, and air in a blanket of calm. You breathe it in, ready to follow that call toward the quiet heart of faith that lies within the castle walls. The bell's echo follows you as you climb a short flight of steps that lead toward the chapel. The air changes almost immediately, cooler and still, as if the sound itself has washed away the noise of the courtyard. The faint scent of incense drifts through the corridor, mingled with beeswax and the faint damp of old stone. You push open a wooden door and step inside the castle's spiritual heart. Light filters through narrow stained glass windows, casting streaks of color that move gently across the floor. The space feels smaller than you expected, intimate rather than grand. A single candle burns at the altar, its flame steady despite the draught. The silence is deep, not empty but full of presence, like the hush before a prayer. This is where every day in the castle begins and ends. Before meals, before battles, before decisions, there is always a pause here. Religion shapes time as much as the sun does. Bells mark the hours. Matins in the dark before dawn. Prime in the early light. Vespers at dusk. Each sound carries a reminder that even lords and soldiers are part of a larger rhythm. A priest in a simple brown robe moves near the altar, arranging a small book and a chalice. He nods as you enter, his expression kind but distant. You sense that he knows every soul in this place, yet remains slightly apart, belonging more to eternity than to earth. According to surviving records, Most castles had small chapels built within their walls. They served both practical and spiritual needs. Weddings, baptisms, and funerals all happened here, binding the household in shared memory. It was not only a place of worship, but of solace. In a world of constant uncertainty, prayer was a language of stability. You walk toward a wooden bench and sit. The seat is smooth from years of use. Above you, the faint glimmer of gilded paint outlines an image of the Virgin and Child. The colors have faded, yet the tenderness in their faces remains. You feel a calm settle in your chest, slow and deep. A group of servants enters quietly, heads bowed. They kneel, whispering short prayers. Their hands are rough, their clothes plain, but their devotion is absolute. Faith here crosses every rank. The lord and his cook, the falconer and the maid, all share the same hope when they step through this door. The priest begins to sing in Latin, his voice low but resonant. It rolls through the chapel like smoke, filling every corner. You cannot understand the words, but you feel their warmth. The sound rises and falls like breathing. This chant has echoed for centuries, unbroken by time. Some modern researchers note that the chapel's schedule shaped every aspect of daily life. Meals, work, and even sleep followed the rhythm of prayer. It was a way of measuring not just time but meaning. To ignore the bells was to drift outside the fabric of the world. A young boy carries a candle to the altar and lights two more beside it. His hands tremble slightly, but the flame catches. The light glows golden against the stone. He steps back, eyes wide, as if he has just performed a miracle. In a way, he has. Every act of faith here, no matter how small, feels like a bridge between the fragile and the eternal. Curiously enough, medieval people did not always see religion as solemn. Feast days were celebrations filled with color and joy. The same chapel that now holds silence might, on a saint's day, ring with song and laughter. Faith was not just obedience, it was the art of finding beauty in the ordinary. You notice a small carved bench near the side wall. On it lies a book of Psalms, its cover cracked with age. The parchment inside is soft from touch, the ink faded to brown. A few notes are scribbled in the margins, perhaps the thoughts of a long-forgotten priest. You trace one line with your finger, feeling the indentation of the quill. It's strange to think that faith once had texture, that belief could be touched. There is ongoing debate among historians about how deeply religion shaped personal emotion in medieval life. Some argue it offered comfort in hardship. Others say it controlled through fear. Sitting here, you feel both truths intertwined. The peace of the place carries a weight, as if awe and affection share the same heartbeat. A woman enters, her veil trailing softly. She kneels and lights a small votive candle, whispering something under her breath. The flame joins the others, each one a tiny heartbeat of hope. The air seems to shimmer in their glow. Oddly, one 13th-century writer claimed that the light of a single candle could drive away demons more effectively than an army of knights. The thought makes you smile quietly. Perhaps the people who lived here believed that goodness itself had a scent and a glow. The priest finishes his song, closes his book, and bows his head. The silence that follows is absolute. For a moment, the whole castle feels still, as if even the stones are listening. You find yourself breathing slower, matching the rhythm of the flickering flames. When the priest finally turns to extinguish the candles, the smoke curls upward in thin ribbons, pale and fragrant. It rises toward the vaulted ceiling, twining with the fading light. The servants cross themselves and leave in single file, their footsteps soft against the floor. You stand, reluctant to break the calm. Outside the window, sunlight catches dust motes in the air, turning them into drifting gold. You step into that light, feeling it warm your face. The bell tolls again, signaling the end of the hour. As you leave the chapel, the quiet follows you like a soft cloak. In the distance, faint music drifts upward, laughter, a drumbeat, the hum of preparation. A celebration is coming, one that will turn solemn stone into a festival of sound and colour. The day is not done, and neither is the life within these walls. You follow the sound of drums and laughter through the echoing corridors until the air itself seems to shimmer with anticipation. The sun has begun to sink, painting the castle walls with streaks of gold and red. The courtyard that only hours ago bustled with chores is now being transformed into a scene of celebration. Tables are dragged out from storerooms, torches are lit, and the smell of roasting meat fills the air again, this time richer, spicier, and wilder. Tonight, the castle celebrates. Perhaps it is a saint's day, a harvest feast, or the return of a lord from distant lands. Whatever the reason, no one questions it. You step into the courtyard, and the hum of excitement envelops you. Servants laugh as they string garlands of greenery across the walls. Minstrels tune their instruments by the gate, plucking and adjusting until their notes glide softly through the twilight. In the center of the yard, a huge fire crackles, its sparks rising into the darkening sky. The flames dance and roar, reflecting off the helmets of guards and the eyes of children who hover nearby. The air smells of pine smoke and sweet wine, and somewhere in the background, someone begins to sing. Records from medieval chronicles describe such nights vividly. Feasts were not just indulgence, they were a form of storytelling, a way to remind everyone who they were. For nobles, it was an act of generosity. For servants, a rare taste of joy, and for travellers, a glimpse of belonging. A servant offers you a wooden cup filled with warm spiced ale. The liquid tastes of cinnamon and cloves, sweet and sharp at once. It burns pleasantly in your throat, and the warmth spreads through your chest. Around you, people begin to gather, their faces glowing in the firelight. A piper strikes up a tune, quick and bright, and the rhythm spreads like a pulse. Platters appear from the kitchen, roasted geese glistening with fat, bowls of stewed apples, and pies fragrant with herbs and venison. You notice how everyone eats together now. The usual lines of rank blur in moments like this. Servants sit beside squires. Even the lord and lady, at their high table, smile more freely, their gestures loose and unguarded. For one night, the castle breathes as one body. You bite into a piece of bread still warm from the oven. Its crust crackles softly, the inside tender and sweet. The noise of chatter and music swells until it feels like the very walls are vibrating. Someone begins to clap in rhythm, and before long, a circle of dancers forms near the fire. They spin and laugh, skirts twirling, boots stamping. The ground itself seems to tremble with joy. Curiously enough, some accounts mention that medieval dancing was as much about storytelling as movement. Each gesture carried meaning: a raised hand for courtship, a bow for respect, a spin for freedom. Looking around now, you can see it. Every motion speaks. Even the laughter feels choreographed, part of a collective rhythm that no one questions. You spot the juggler next, a man with nimble hands and a mischievous grin. He tosses bright apples into the air. 3, then 4, then 5, the crowd gasping with each new height. A small child squeals in delight as one apple drops, bounces, and is caught again at the last second. The laughter that follows ripples like a wave. A musician nearby begins to sing a ballad about a knight who fell in love with a baker's daughter. The story is half truth, half fantasy, but everyone listens as if it were legend. His voice rises over the crackle of fire and the clatter of plates. You can feel the energy in the air shift from noise to wonder. Many historians have debated how often feasts like this occurred. Some claim they were frequent, vital to morale. Others argue they were rare luxuries, reserved for the few times the castle could afford to celebrate. Standing here, surrounded by laughter and music, it feels as if joy itself is a necessity. Perhaps people needed moments like this to survive the cold months ahead. The lady of the castle stands and raises her cup. Her voice carries across the yard, clear and strong, offering thanks to God, to the workers, and to the land. The crowd responds with cheers that echo into the dark. Someone tosses more logs into the fire, and sparks explode upward like stars. For a moment, the night feels endless. A curious detail survives from one old feast account. Some lords would hide coins or trinkets inside a pie, and whoever found them was crowned the Lord of Misrule for the evening. That person could give playful commands, even mock the noble guests. The rule of laughter replaced the rule of rank. As if on cue, a cheer rises from the far side of the courtyard. A young servant girl holds up a coin she has just bitten from a slice of pie. The crowd roars, and she bows deeply, grinning. The jester appears then, bells tinkling at his cap, his grin wide and knowing. He leaps onto a barrel and begins to tell a story filled with riddles and half-truths. Every few lines he slips in a sly comment about the lord's appetite or the steward's stinginess. The audience howls with laughter. The lord himself chuckles, pretending not to notice. Humour, here, is both shield and sword. You watch as the jester dances between truth and folly, weaving his words like threads in a tapestry. His laughter hides wisdom, his foolishness conceals courage. Oddly, one chronicler once wrote that the jester was often the only person who could speak the truth without fear. Standing here, you understand why. As the fire burns lower, the music softens. People lean back, their faces drowsy with wine and warmth. Someone begins to sing a slower song, one about home and harvest and hope. The melody drifts upward into the night sky, mingling with the smoke. The stars above the towers flicker like candles. You breathe in deeply. The air tastes of smoke, spice, and faint sweetness. Around you, the castle feels softer now, its edges blurred by light and laughter. For a moment, time itself seems to loosen its grip. The feast will go on until the moon sinks behind the hills, until even the last ember fades. But already, you sense that the castle is returning to calm. The laughter quiets, the footsteps slow. Soon, torches will burn low, and the corridors will glow once more with candlelight instead of flame. Somewhere within those walls, the jester will rest, the musicians will store their lutes, and the cooks will sigh with tired satisfaction. The castle, full from its joy, will dream. The laughter from the feast still echoes faintly in the halls as you make your way toward a smaller chamber near the edge of the great hall. The light here is dimmer, quieter, the kind that belongs to late evening when the fire has burned down to a soft orange glow. Inside, a single figure sits by the hearth, hunched slightly over a goblet of wine. The bells on his cap barely move. It is the jester, the castle's strange poet of truth. He looks up as you enter, his expression caught somewhere between amusement and thought. His eyes are sharp, far too knowing for someone dressed in motley. He gestures for you to sit, and when you do, he tilts his head as if weighing your silence. Then he smiles, the kind of smile that hides both kindness and cunning. "You missed the best part," he says softly. "The fool's blessing." He takes a sip of wine and waves his hand vaguely toward the great hall. They cheer when I tell them what they already know, and laugh because they are afraid to nod. You realize how strange his position must be. The jester is at once an outsider and a confidant, the only person in the castle who can mock power and survive it. Many surviving chronicles describe jesters as entertainers, yet some hint at something deeper. They were counselors wrapped in humor, philosophers disguised as clowns. The firelight flickers across his face, catching the tiredness behind his grin. He plucks at the strings of a lute lying beside him, tuning it with care. A soft note hums through the room, then another. The melody he plays is slow and haunting, the kind that seems to speak without words. "This one," he says, "is for the Lord's conscience. I play it when he sleeps too easily." He laughs quietly, though his eyes do not. Curiously, one letter written by a medieval courtier mentions a fool who was given free access to his master's chamber because his words were said to cleanse the air of lies. That idea feels true as you sit here. The jester's presence carries both mischief and clarity, like a candle held to a mirror. He sets the lute down and stretches his legs. You think we jesters only dance and rhyme? He asks. We listen, we remember, we speak softly when others are loud. He looks into the fire, and the silence between you stretches comfortably. On a nearby table sits a small wooden box. He opens it and reveals a few curious objects. A feather quill, a deck of worn cards, a coin with a hole through it, and a tiny carved figure of a bird. Each item seems to tell a story. He lifts the coin and lets it swing on a string. Luck, he says, or the illusion of it. Everyone believes it works until it doesn't. He flips one of the cards face up. It shows a crowned man upside down, a drawing made with rough ink. I made this one myself, he says. A king who listens to no one but the fool. Dangerous creature, that one. He slides the card back into the deck and grins. Perhaps it's safer to be a fool. No one expects wisdom, so you can speak it freely. Some modern historians have wondered whether jesters truly had influence over their lords. Letters and diaries suggest that many did. They offered counsel during disputes, carried messages, even mediated between rival nobles. Their words, cloaked in laughter, could steer decisions that shaped entire regions. The jester leans back and sighs. They call me foolish, yet they hand me secrets between jokes. The steward worries about taxes, the lady asks about dreams, the knight tells me which banner frightens him most. He chuckles softly, and all I do is listen. He picks up the lute again, plucking another tune. This one is livelier, full of playful twists. You recognize fragments of a song from the feast earlier, now reshaped into something more teasing. Music, he says, is the safest way to tell the truth. You can sing anything if the melody is sweet enough. There is a story he shares then, his voice low. Once, he says, he angered a visiting noble by mocking his greed. The man struck him, and the hall went silent. The lord of the castle, calm but firm, said, "If the fool cannot speak freely, then we are all fools." The noble apologized, and the jester was given an extra loaf of bread that night. Sometimes, he adds, truth wins quietly. Oddly enough, there are records of jesters travelling between courts, carrying news disguised as jokes. They were both entertainers and informants, their songs coded with messages. Some even served as spies, their motley disguising far more dangerous knowledge. The jester pours another small cup of wine and hands it to you. The drink tastes faintly of honey and smoke. Do you know why I stay here? He asks. You shake your head. Because this castle listens. Most don't. He smiles, a little wistfully. These walls echo laughter better than anger. That is rare. He stands and stretches, his shadow flickering across the wall. From the courtyard below comes the faint sound of lingering voices, servants cleaning up after the feast, dogs sniffing for scraps. The castle exhales, settling into its slower rhythm. The jester glances toward the door. They will sleep soon. The lords, the knights, the cooks, even the hawk in the mews. Only the stones will stay awake. They always do. He pauses, his gaze distant. Maybe they listen too. You ask him if he believes the stones remember. He chuckles softly. Oh, they do. Every secret, every song, every prayer, they just don't gossip. The room falls quiet again, and he begins to hum a lullaby, low and steady. It's a tune from the countryside, something a mother might sing to a child. The melody wraps around you, simple and tender, and for a moment, even the flicker of the fire seems to sway with it. When the song ends, he looks at you and says, "Tomorrow the Lord will ask for counsel. He'll say he dreamt of a bird trapped in a hall of mirrors. I'll tell him to open a window. That's what fools are for, to remind the wise to breathe." He grins again, a spark of mischief returning to his eyes, and gestures toward the door. "Go rest," he says. "Tomorrow has long ears." You leave him there by the fire, humming softly to himself. As you step into the corridor, the music fades, replaced by the soft creak of settling wood and the sigh of wind through the arrow slits. The castle feels drowsy now, its laughter spent. Yet somewhere deep within its quiet, the fool's wisdom lingers like a smile that refuses to fade. The next morning dawns grey and cool, the air heavy with mist that curls around the towers and walls like a living thing. The courtyard is quiet again, its laughter replaced by the low murmur of guards changing shifts. You walk slowly along the inner passageway that leads upward toward the ramparts, your hand trailing along the cold stone. The scent of damp air and iron fills your lungs. This is where the castle reveals its other face, not of celebration, but of vigilance. You step through an arched doorway and emerge onto the battlements. The wind greets you instantly, cold and sharp, tugging at your cloak. Below, the landscape spreads in soft shades of green and brown, dotted with cottages, fields, and distant smoke rising from morning fires. From this height, the world feels vast yet fragile, like a tapestry stretching to the horizon. A guard salutes as you pass, his armor faintly glinting in the pale light. He looks weary, but alert. The rhythm of his footsteps echoes along the wall walk, steady as a heartbeat. This place is not just for watching, it is for listening. Every gust of wind, every creak of the wood, every bird's cry could carry meaning. According to surviving military records, castles were rarely under siege for long periods, yet every day was lived as if the threat might return. The architecture itself was a kind of language of defense. The walls were thick, not only for strength but for sound. Arrow slits narrowed inward, giving defenders wide fields of fire while protecting them from attack. Even the spiral staircases were built to favor right-handed swordsmen. You rest your hands on the rough stone of the parapet. It is cold, rough, and damp from dew. You imagine the countless hands that have touched it before, each one leaving a faint trace of fear, hope, or boredom. Life on guard duty was not heroic, but enduring. Long hours, short meals, and a constant awareness of silence. The wind carries the cry of a falcon. You look up to see it circling high above the tower, wings flashing silver in the morning light. Its flight feels free, effortless, in contrast to the stillness below. You wonder how many guards over the centuries have watched the same kind of bird and felt the same longing for open air beyond the walls. A captain appears beside you, his cloak trimmed with fur against the chill. He offers a polite nod and begins his inspection, checking the position of barrels, arrows, and ropes. Every tool has a place. He explains that the castle's safety depends as much on routine as on courage. A single loose hinge or forgotten torch could invite disaster. Curiously enough, archaeological studies show that castles were as much symbols of control as they were fortresses. Their tall towers were meant to be seen, to remind villagers and travelers alike of power and order. Even when no enemies came, their presence spoke louder than any sword. Below you, the drawbridge creaks as it lowers slightly to let a cart through. The sound reverberates through the air, low and heavy. Chains clink, the wood groans, and then settles. The captain watches carefully, his face unreadable. Even a routine movement like that carries weight. One misstep could mean ruin. He tells you that storms can test the castle more fiercely than enemies ever could. Rain seeping into cracks, frost expanding in the stone, lightning striking the towers. The sky is a harder foe than men, he says with a half smile. You can see what he means. The wind tugs harder now, biting through your cloak. The stones under your feet vibrate with the breath of the storm gathering in the distance. Some modern researchers have debated whether castle defenses were more psychological than practical. High walls might impress more than they truly protect. Yet as you stand here, watching the layers of earth, stone, and mist blend together, it feels as if the very act of building them was a kind of faith. To raise such walls was to declare belief in survival. The captain points toward the far tower, where a lookout leans against the wall, squinting toward the hills. He raises a hand to shade his eyes, then calls something down in the old tongue. It is only a flock of birds, but for a moment, everyone's attention sharpens. Vigilance has its own kind of prayer. Oddly, one fragment from a medieval poem compares the walls of a castle to the ribs of a living creature, saying that within them beats the heart of courage. You think about that as you look at the walls stretching around you. The stones seem to hum faintly in the wind, like bones singing beneath skin. You walk further along the battlements. In the corners, small alcoves hold barrels of water, ready for fire or siege. A cat sits curled beside one, watching you with slow curiosity. Even here, amid cold stone and duty, life finds softness. The captain pauses and rests his hand on the hilt of his sword. He tells you that at night, when the torches burn low, the castle feels almost like a ship sailing through the dark. The walls creak, the banners shift, and the guards become its crew, steering it through the silence of sleep. You smile at the image. It fits perfectly. There is still debate among historians about how often castles truly saw battle. Some were built for war but spent centuries in peace, their towers never tested by siege, yet the discipline remained. Every watch, every patrol, every quiet morning like this one trained people to stay ready, to respect the strength of the walls that held them safe. The captain finishes his inspection and nods toward the inner stair. The storm will pass before night, he says. It always does. You thank him and turn to leave. As you descend, the light dims again, and the wind fades into the muffled heartbeat of the corridors below. You glance once more at the stone around you, its surface rough and glistening with moisture. It feels both eternal and fragile, alive with the memory of those who built and guarded it. The hum of protection lingers in your ears as you step back into the warmth of the castle's inner rooms. Ahead, you catch a whiff of something sharp and herbal: sage, mint, and vinegar. The smell leads you toward a smaller chamber where candles burn beside a table lined with glass jars and bandages. The infirmary awaits, a place where the fragility behind all this strength quietly reveals itself. The scent of herbs grows stronger as you enter the small chamber tucked behind the main hall. The air here feels different, thicker with warmth and quiet concentration. Light spills from a row of narrow windows, falling onto shelves crowded with bottles, clay jars, and bundles of dried plants hanging upside down from the rafters. A kettle simmers on the hearth, filling the room with the mingled fragrances of mint, rosemary, and something bitter that you cannot name. This is the infirmary, the castle's quiet refuge for pain and recovery. A woman in a plain wool dress turns as you step inside. Her hair is streaked with grey, her sleeves rolled up to the elbows. Her hands move with steady confidence, crushing herbs in a mortar. She greets you with a nod and gestures for silence. Someone is sleeping in the cot beside the fire. You glance over and see a man lying still beneath a wool blanket, his face pale but peaceful. A faint smell of vinegar drifts from the bandages wrapped around his arm. According to surviving medical texts, every large household kept an herbalist or healer who blended practical skill with faith. Medicine in the Middle Ages was as much about patience and prayer as it was about herbs and instruments. People believed that health came from balance of body, spirit, and the world itself. The healer stirs the mixture and pours it into a small wooden bowl. She tests its warmth with her finger, then adds a drop of honey. "For the taste," she whispers, smiling faintly. No one heals if the cure makes them grim. You notice the shelves behind her, lined with small clay labels scratched in Latin. Salvia, ruta, angelica, hyssop. Some names you recognize, others sound like spells. She hands you a small sprig of lavender and tells you to crush it gently between your fingers. The scent releases instantly, soft and calming. She explains that the flower is used to soothe fever and ease restless minds. Sometimes, she says, a wound is in the head, not the flesh. Her words hang in the air like smoke, carrying a wisdom both simple and ancient. On a nearby table, instruments of care are neatly arranged. Scissors, needles, strips of linen, and a few curved knives for bloodletting. Their metal gleams in the firelight. Bloodletting, she tells you, is a last resort, used only when balance must be restored by removing what is heavy. Her tone is calm, without superstition or shame. She works with what she has and what she believes. Curiously enough, Some household records mention that the castle's herbalist often doubled as midwife and counselor. She tended to childbirth, fevers, toothaches, and heartbreak alike. Her presence was both practical and sacred. In a world where illness could spread faster than rumor, her work carried quiet courage. You watch as she checks the man's bandage, her movements tender but efficient. The wound beneath is clean, pink at the edges. She murmurs a short prayer in Latin before rewrapping it, a rhythm that seems half ritual, half reassurance. Her patient stirs slightly, sighs, and drifts back into sleep. There is still debate among scholars about how effective medieval medicine truly was. Some argue that it was guided more by faith than fact. Others point out that many remedies, honey for wounds, garlic for infection, chamomile for pain, remain useful even today. What mattered most, perhaps, was the care itself, the human attention that made recovery possible. The healer moves toward another shelf and opens a small wooden chest. Inside are tiny glass vials sealed with wax. She lifts one and holds it to the light. The liquid inside gleams gold. Oil of Street John's wort, she says. Good for cuts, burns, and bad dreams. She opens the cork and lets you smell it. The scent is earthy and strong, like crushed grass after rain. Oddly, some medieval healers believed that dreams themselves could diagnose illness. A vision of water might suggest imbalance in the blood. Fire might foretell fever. The healer here smiles when you mention this. Dreams tell truths that words hide, she says, wiping her hands on her apron. Sometimes I listen better at night. A boy enters quietly, carrying a jug of clean water from the well. He looks nervous but proud. The healer praises him for his steadiness and tells him to wash the herbs waiting in a basin. He obeys, his hands careful, his focus absolute. You can see the rhythm of learning taking root even in this small act. The kettle begins to whistle softly, and the healer lifts it from the fire. She pours steaming water into a bowl filled with crushed mint and thyme, creating a cloud of fragrant vapor. She waves it gently under your face. The warmth opens your breath instantly, and your eyes sting slightly from the sharpness of the mint. That is the smell of clean air, she says. It chases sickness from the lungs. Some modern researchers have noted that medieval infirmaries served not only for healing but also for rest and reflection. People came here to be quiet, to let the body and soul align. Even the sound of bubbling water or the scent of herbs was part of the cure. You feel that truth in the calm that fills this room. The healer begins to hum softly, a tune without words, as she mixes another salve. The notes float through the air, blending with the fire's crackle and the patient's slow breathing. It is neither joy nor sorrow, but something in between, a song for endurance. She glances at you and smiles again. When you walk these halls, remember, she says, strength is not only in stone and sword, it is also in hands that mend and hearts that wait. Her voice is gentle but sure. You thank her quietly and step back toward the doorway. The air outside feels cooler now, thinner after the warmth of that room. You can still smell the lavender on your fingers, its calm clinging to your skin. Somewhere deeper in the castle, faint music begins to rise, delicate and slow. The day is waning, and with evening comes the softer rhythm of rest and reflection. You follow the sound of the harp, letting it guide you through winding corridors lit by torchlight. Each note carries a shimmer of peace, and the closer you get, the more you feel the castle easing into twilight. The business of the day fades, replaced by the music of quiet human breath. The corridor opens into a chamber bathed in golden light. Candles burn along the walls, their reflections trembling softly across polished stone. The air feels warm, the kind of warmth that comes not from fire but from sound. At the center of the room sit three musicians, one with a harp, another with a lute, and the third holding a small recorder. Their fingers move slowly at first, shaping the air with melody. The sound is tender, fluid, and timeless. You stand at the edge of the room, listening. The music floats upward, filling the vaulted ceiling with notes that seem to shimmer like falling dust. It is not loud, yet it feels immense, as if it could reach every corner of the castle. The harp's low strings hum beneath the lute's gentle rhythm, while the recorder weaves a melody as delicate as breath. This is how night begins in the castle, with music instead of words. The day's work fades, replaced by stillness and reflection. People drift in quietly, drawn by the sound. Servants pause in the doorway, knights lean against the walls, and the lady of the castle takes her place near the hearth. No one speaks. They simply listen. According to writings from medieval courts, evening music was more than entertainment. It was a ceremony of rest, a reminder that beauty could exist even after hardship. The songs told stories of love, loss, faith, and longing. To hear them was to remember one's place in the larger tapestry of the world. The harpist plucks a minor chord, and the sound trembles like light on water. The melody shifts to something slower, more wistful. You can feel the room soften, the edges of thought blur. The music seems to invite the heart to wander, to remember without pain. Curiously enough, many medieval melodies followed patterns drawn from nature. Birdsongs, flowing rivers, and the rhythm of the wind often inspired composers. The aim was not to dominate the air, but to move with it. Listening now, you sense that same harmony between human hands and the living world. A young boy enters with a tray of wine cups, his steps perfectly silent on the stone. He offers one to each musician, then retreats to the wall, eyes wide. He looks mesmerized, as if hearing something that belongs to a dream. The lute player smiles at him and nods in rhythm, a silent encouragement to join the invisible dance of the notes. The lady of the castle leans back in her chair. Her eyes are closed, her face peaceful. Her fingers move faintly, following the rhythm. She seems to know the tune by heart. The lord sits beside her, more still, his expression caught between thought and surrender. You realize that this music carries not just sound, but memory. The memory of peace after work, of order after chaos. Some scholars have suggested that music in castles functioned as a bridge between worlds. It softened power, transformed authority into grace. A harsh word spoken in daylight might be forgiven beneath the hush of a song. The act of listening itself was a kind of reconciliation. The harpist begins a new piece, livelier now, with quick flicks of her fingers. The sound dances lightly through the room, carrying with it faint hints of joy. A few people smile, a few tap their feet. Even the guards at the door seem to relax. For a moment, the castle feels entirely human, less fortress, more home. Oddly, one surviving account from a 15th century household describes how certain melodies were believed to heal melancholy. Musicians were asked to play specific intervals to balance the humours of the body, much like herbs or baths did in medicine. The connection between sound and health was not metaphor but belief. The lute player looks up and catches your gaze. He gestures for you to come closer, and you do, drawn by the calm. He strikes a slow, deliberate chord and says softly, "Listen to how the notes fade." You do, and indeed, each sound lingers longer than it should, as if unwilling to die. "The echo is the soul of the castle," he adds, smiling faintly. "It sings back to us." He begins to play again, and the recorder joins, weaving around the melody like a drifting thread. The harmony is simple but profound. It feels like breathing, like the quiet pulse of life itself. You close your eyes for a moment and feel your heartbeat matching the rhythm. There is some disagreement among historians about how much of this music was written down and how much was improvised. Some believe that performers played by memory, passing songs orally from one generation to the next. Others claim detailed notation existed even for informal pieces. Listening here, you suspect both might be true. The music feels both deliberate and spontaneous, shaped by the room, the air, the moment. As the final chord fades, the silence that follows feels sacred. No one claps, no one speaks. The sound lingers in the mind like a fragrance. Slowly, people begin to move again quietly, respectfully. The lady thanks the musicians, her voice soft and warm. They bow and begin to pack their instruments with care, wrapping each one in cloth as if tucking them to sleep. The room empties, leaving only the faint glow of candles and the scent of warmed wax. You remain for a moment, unwilling to break the spell. The echo of the harp seems to hum inside your chest long after the strings have gone still. A servant enters to snuff out the candles. The smoke rises in graceful spirals, catching the last glimmer of light. You breathe it in, carrying the memory of sound within the quiet that follows. Outside the chamber, the castle has grown hushed. The corridors stretch ahead in shadow, lit only by torches. The day is fading into full night now. Somewhere, doors close, footsteps soften, and the rhythm of the world slows. It is time to follow the music's peace into rest. You walk down the hall, guided by the dim glow of the last torch, and turn toward the sleeping quarters where the air smells of linen, smoke, and dreams waiting to begin. The torches flicker as you step into the long corridor that leads to the sleeping chambers. The noise of the castle has faded into a distant hush, leaving behind the faint crackle of dying fires and the soft whisper of your own footsteps. The air smells of candle wax, wool, and faint traces of smoke from the kitchens below. Night has folded itself around the castle like a thick, dark blanket. You push open a wooden door and enter one of the upper chambers. The room feels both large and small at once, filled with shadow but softened by the gentle light of a single lamp. A canopy bed stands near the far wall, its curtains drawn halfway closed. The linen sheets are clean but coarse, smelling faintly of lavender and ash. A small brazier glows in the corner, filling the air with slow warmth. Sleep in a castle is not the deep, quiet thing you might imagine. It is fragile, layered, and filled with sound. Outside the windows, the wind sighs through the arrow slits, whistling softly as if the building itself is breathing. Somewhere far below, a guard coughs. The echo rises through the stone like the heartbeat of the night. According to household documents from medieval estates, the castle rarely slept all at once. Servants took turns watching fires, guards walked their rounds, and nurses tended to children or to the sick. Even nobles stirred often, waking to the sound of bells, wind, or dreams. Sleep was a luxury, not a guarantee. You sit beside the hearth for a moment, letting your body absorb the heat. The shadows move gently across the walls, stretching and shrinking with the firelight. Near the bed, a chest sits open, revealing folded clothes, a silver comb, and a small rosary. Beside it, a candle burns low, wax pooling like honey. The light flickers against the ceiling, and the whole room seems to exhale. A servant enters quietly, carrying a bucket of warm water. She kneels, pours it into a shallow basin, and places a towel beside it. Her movements are slow and silent. You ask how often the lady of the castle sleeps soundly. She smiles faintly and shakes her head. Rarely, she whispers. The walls are kind, but they remember too much. Her words make you look toward the window, where the darkness presses close like a living thing. Curiously enough, many people in the Middle Ages divided their sleep into two halves. They called them first sleep and second sleep, waking for a time in between to pray, talk, or tend to tasks. In that soft interval, the castle would glow faintly with small lights, its silence broken by murmured voices and the creak of doors. The rhythm of rest was more like breathing than stopping. You walk to the window. Outside, the courtyard is nearly empty save for a lone torch flickering near the gatehouse. The stars above are sharp and cold, scattered across the sky like spilled salt. The air smells faintly of rain. You can almost hear the slow beat of the river beyond the walls. On the far side of the room, the lady of the castle lies in bed, her face relaxed in half sleep. The firelight touches her features gently, painting them gold and shadow. She murmurs something you cannot hear, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a dream. Beside her, a small spaniel curls up, tail twitching in its sleep. The rhythm of their breathing fills the room. Some modern historians have noted that the bedchamber was more than a place to rest. It was where private life unfolded, births, illnesses, conversations that shaped decisions. The intimacy of this space was a quiet power, hidden from public view but essential to the castle's rhythm. You notice the faint hum of night insects outside the walls, mixing with the crackle of the fire. The sounds merge into something soothing, a music of their own. Sleep comes slowly in such places, not as escape, but as surrender. The servant finishes her work, straightens the coverlet, and places the towel near the basin. Before leaving, she looks around the room one last time, checking every candle and shadow. Her care feels almost like devotion. When she steps out, the door closes with a gentle sigh. You stand alone now, watching the fire burn lower. The shadows stretch longer, then fade. You sit at the edge of the bed, listening. The sound of snoring rises faintly from another room, joined by the distant yawn of a dog. The smell of wool, smoke, and lavender lulls your thoughts into stillness. Oddly, some medieval people believed that dreams carried messages from God, while others thought they were whispers from wandering spirits. Scholars still debate whether people feared sleep or trusted it. Looking at the calm faces around you, you feel that sleep here is an act of faith. The world outside may change, but for a few hours within these walls there is peace. The last candle sputters, its flame bending low. You reach out and pinch it between your fingers. The room falls into darkness, but not emptiness. The stone seems to hum softly, the fire's embers glowing like eyes half closed. For a moment, you can almost feel the castle dreaming with its inhabitants, breathing slowly in the rhythm of night. You lie back and close your eyes. The scent of ash and lavender fills your lungs. Beyond the walls, the wind hums, steady and constant. Somewhere in the depths of the castle, a clock strikes softly, counting the slow passage of time. The sound echoes once, twice, then fades. Sleep comes at last, fragile but kind. The castle rests, the world turns, and the night holds everyone in its calm embrace. When morning comes again, it arrives gently. Pale light seeps through the narrow windows, brushing the edges of the bed curtains and waking the room in slow silence. The fire has burned down to a soft mound of grey ash. The scent of sleep still lingers, a mix of wool, smoke, and the faint sweetness of yesterday's lavender. You rise and stretch, hearing the quiet creak of wood under your feet. The castle is not yet fully awake, but it is beginning to stir. Outside the door, the corridor hums faintly with footsteps and low voices. Somewhere nearby, a servant yawns, another laughs softly. The air feels cool, touched by the damp breath of dawn. You walk toward the stairway, your hand brushing the wall's cold surface. The stones are slick with condensation, as if the night has left its memory behind. You reach the courtyard and see the sky still streaked with mist. A rooster crows, echoing between the towers. The rhythm of daily life is beginning again, quiet at first but growing steady. The castle does not rest for long. Its routines are as constant as breath. A group of servants emerges from the kitchen, carrying baskets of bread and water jugs. Steam curls from the loaves, warm against the chill. They move quickly, each person knowing exactly where to go. One woman calls out instructions, her voice brisk but kind. The day starts not with grandeur but with repetition, the familiar rhythm of survival. According to surviving household ledgers, mornings in castles were marked by order and simplicity. The first task was always to rekindle the fires, the next to clean, then to prepare for the Lord's breaking of fast. Routine was protection against chaos. Even power relied on rhythm. You cross the courtyard to the well, where a boy draws water by hand. The rope creaks, the bucket rises, and droplets glint like tiny stars as they spill into the morning air. He nods to you, his cheeks red from the cold. You take a sip from the wooden dipper he offers. The water is shockingly fresh, grounding you in the moment. Nearby, a washerwoman beats cloth against a flat stone, her movements strong and certain. The sound is both harsh and soothing, like the drumbeat of work. The laundry flaps on a line, bright against the dull sky. The scent of lye and soap drifts upward, cutting through the damp. Her hands are rough but graceful, shaped by years of repetition. Curiously enough, early medieval castles rarely had dedicated washing rooms. Most cleaning took place outdoors, near the wells or rivers. Later, enclosed laundries were added, often near kitchens where heat could help dry fabric faster. Even small architectural details reflected the endless negotiation between need and comfort. A stable door opens, and the smell of hay and animals rolls into the courtyard. A groom leads out a grey horse, its breath steaming in the air. He rubs its neck affectionately and murmurs a few words before tightening the saddle straps. The horse stamps once, then stills. Morning rides were part of duty, whether for hunting, inspection, or simply to feel alive before the day's obligations began. The falconer appears next, his hooded bird resting quietly on his gloved arm. He pauses by the well, letting the falcon drink from his cupped hand. You notice the gentleness in his gesture, the quiet understanding between creature and keeper. Every movement here, even the smallest, carries intention. Some modern historians have suggested that the early morning hours were the truest measure of a household's discipline. The silence before speech, the first steps into the day, revealed the strength of its rhythm. Watching now, you can see how this world runs not on commands, but on memory actions repeated until they become instinct. A priest passes through the courtyard, his robe catching the light. He nods to the workers, and they pause just long enough to bow their heads in brief acknowledgement. The chapel bell begins to ring, clear and slow. It marks the start of prime, the first official prayer of the day. A few people cross themselves and continue working, their motions in time with the sound. Oddly, one chronicler described these bells as the castle's second heartbeat, the first being the people themselves. You feel that truth now, the vibration of human effort, the pulse of metal and stone resonating together. The mist begins to lift. Sunlight spills across the courtyard, touching every corner of life. The walls glow golden, and the air warms slightly. You see how the light transforms everything. The banners brighten, the water sparkles, the faces of the workers soften. Even the horses seem to gleam as though the sun itself blesses them. You sit for a moment on the low wall near the herb garden, watching. Bees drift lazily over the thyme. The scent of damp earth rises, mingled with the sweetness of flowers. You realize that every morning here begins not just with work, but with beauty hidden inside it. The castle, for all its strength, lives on small tendernesses. The steward approaches, ledger in hand, calling names and duties. His tone is calm, his posture straight. He checks supplies, issues instructions, notes which stores must be restocked. It is a language of order, spoken without words. The castle wakes completely now, alive once more with purpose. There is still debate among historians about whether the medieval day began earlier than ours. Some records suggest people rose with the sun, others long before it, when stars still lingered. Looking at this morning's scene, you sense that dawn was never simply a time of light. It was a state of readiness, a call to balance effort with reverence. The bell rings again, signaling the end of prayer. The courtyard fills with the steady hum of tasks resuming. Bread is carried to the hall, horses led to the fields, firewood stacked for the kitchens. The rhythm quickens, sure and ancient. You rise and begin to walk along the wall's edge, breathing in the cool air. The sunlight touches your skin, soft and new. For a moment, you imagine how many mornings like this. The castle has seen each one unique, yet always the same. The same bells, the same water, the same quiet resolve. As you turn toward the inner gate, a faint breeze carries the sound of distant laughter. Somewhere within these walls, someone has already found joy in the day's beginning. You smile, knowing that even in a world of stone, warmth finds its way back every dawn. By midday, the castle is fully awake again. The sun hangs high, scattering light across the courtyard where people move with purpose. You step into the open air, feeling the warmth settle on your skin. The stones underfoot glow softly, their chill from morning replaced by the steady pulse of heat. Life hums everywhere around you, a gentle balance between duty and comfort. A group of craftsmen works near the outer wall, their tools clinking in calm rhythm. One man shapes wood into a chair leg, another repairs a cracked shield, and a third smooths leather straps for harnesses. The smell of sawdust and oil mixes with the faint sweetness of drying herbs from the garden. It feels like the castle is breathing through its work, quietly maintaining itself. You pause beside the carpenter, watching as he bends over his bench. His movements are careful and practiced, each stroke of the blade deliberate. He notices your curiosity and offers a small smile. "The wood listens," he says softly, brushing shavings away. "If you rush, it cracks." You can hear the truth in his voice, a philosophy born not of books but of years. According to estate records, castle workshops like this one produced almost everything needed for daily life. Carpenters built doors, tables, and carts. Blacksmiths forged tools, hinges, and armor. Leatherworkers crafted belts, shoes, and saddles. Trade with nearby towns existed, but the heart of production remained within the walls. Self-reliance was a quiet pride. The blacksmith's forge burns in the corner, its smoke curling into the sky. You walk closer, drawn by the deep, rhythmic clang of hammer on metal. The sound fills the air, steady and powerful. Sparks leap and fade in quick flashes of gold. The blacksmith, broad-shouldered and focused, pulls a glowing horseshoe from the fire and shapes it against the anvil. The smell of heated iron is sharp and alive. Curiously enough, archaeologists studying castle ruins have found traces of workshops built right into the walls themselves, where sound and heat could escape easily through the outer stone. It was practical, but it also gave the fortress a pulse, as if the act of crafting was part of its heartbeat. The blacksmith nods to you, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Everything breaks," he says, "but not everything can be mended. That's what separates a wall from a life." He plunges the horseshoe into a bucket of water. Steam hisses upward, clouding the air with warmth. Nearby, two women weave on a large wooden loom, the shuttle clicking rhythmically back and forth. Threads of blue and red cross in careful order, creating patterns that will one day hang as banners or cover the floors of chambers. Their work looks endless, but their faces are peaceful. The steady sound of weaving feels like time itself, looping and repeating. A curious detail found in old manuscripts describes how patterns on castle textiles often carried meanings. Certain colors symbolized loyalty, others prosperity or courage. A single tapestry could serve as both decoration and story, preserving the spirit of the household through shape and shade. A young apprentice sits beside the weavers, spinning thread from flax fibers. He hums under his breath, a simple tune that rises and falls with the rhythm of the wheel. The thread glimmers faintly in the light, stretching thin and strong. He looks proud of it, as if each strand were proof that he belongs. Some scholars have argued that craftwork in castles was a form of meditation as much as labor. The repetition of motion, the focus on texture and balance, quieted the mind. Watching these workers, you understand how peace could be found even in the middle of duty. Every sound in this space, the clang, the hum, the creak of wood, feels both purposeful and soothing. The steward passes through to check progress, nodding approvingly as he inspects the newly repaired shields. He speaks briefly to the blacksmith, notes something in his ledger, then moves on. His presence brings order without tension. Everyone knows their part, and so the castle hums like a single instrument. Oddly, one poem from the 14th century compares artisans to priests, saying that their hammers sing hymns and their needles pray in silence. You can almost hear that truth here. Each task feels like a devotion to the world's quiet continuance. The afternoon sunlight slants lower, and a gentle breeze moves through the courtyard, lifting bits of straw and ash. The workers pause for a brief meal: bread, cheese, and watered wine. They sit on the low wall, talking softly, laughing between bites. One of them shares a story about a fox sneaking into the chicken coop, and the laughter spreads easily. There is still debate among historians about how much leisure time castle workers had. Some argue that labor consumed every hour of daylight. Others point to songs, festivals, and breaks as evidence of humanity amid the hardship. Here, in this brief pause, you see that second truth, the art of finding joy, even in repetition. The carpenter wipes his hands and gestures toward a half-finished chest. "That will hold linen for the lady's chamber," he says. "Every joint has to fit without flaw. A good chest outlives its maker." His pride is quiet but unmistakable. He returns to work, tapping a peg into place, the sound echoing softly against the wall. You step back and look across the courtyard once more. Everywhere you turn, hands are shaping, mending, or creating. The rhythm is constant, but never hurried. In this world, perfection is not speed but steadiness. The castle is alive not only because of the people who live within it, but because of those who keep it whole. As the sun lowers behind the towers, the golden light turns the air to honey. The workers gather their tools, sweep the ground, and store materials in neat piles. The blacksmith rakes the embers from his forge until they glow faintly, like a heart settling into rest. A bell rings softly from the tower, signaling the hour before supper. The sound drifts across the courtyard, blending with the low voices of those heading inside. You follow slowly, taking one last look at the crafts and the people who shape them. Their work, like the castle itself, is not loud or fleeting. It endures. You step through the archway and into the cool hallway leading to the inner rooms. The scent of evening food already drifts through the air: garlic, bread, and sweet herbs. The hum of the day begins to fade, giving way once more to calm. Evening deepens across the castle, soft and golden at first, then slowly melting into silver and shadow. You walk toward the upper courtyard, where the last light pools along the stones. The day's noise has faded to a quiet murmur: the clatter of dishes from the kitchen, the faint bleating of sheep beyond the walls, the rhythmic footsteps of guards beginning their rounds. The castle exhales as it settles into rest. You pass through the great hall one last time. The fire has burned low, but it still throws a steady orange glow across the long table. The remnants of supper remain: crumbs of bread, a few empty cups, a bowl of herbs left untouched. A servant moves quietly, gathering what is left and wiping the boards clean. Each scrape of the cloth sounds like the closing of a page. According to surviving descriptions of castle life, evening marked not just the end of work, but the return of reflection. The day's labor gave way to thought. Some prayed, others wrote letters, and many simply sat in silence beside the fading fire. Night offered a kind of honesty, when even lords and ladies could rest without titles, stripped down to quiet humanity. You find a small bench near the hearth and sit, listening to the sound of logs shifting in the embers. Sparks rise for a moment, then vanish. The smell of smoke and warm ash fills the air, thick and comforting. A cat curls beside the fire, stretching luxuriously before drifting to sleep. A servant places a cup of warmed wine at your elbow. It tastes faintly of cloves and honey. You sip slowly, the sweetness soft on your tongue. The warmth spreads through your body, and your thoughts begin to drift with the light of the flames. Curiously enough, in many medieval households, wine mixed with spices was not merely a luxury, but a ritual of calm. It was believed to steady the heart and clear the mind before bed. Recipes for these drinks survive, filled with cinnamon, ginger, and pepper. Each cup was a gentle invitation to peace. Across the room, the steward and the priest exchange a few quiet words about tomorrow's weather. Their voices blend with the occasional crackle of the fire, becoming almost part of its rhythm. The priest finally stands, stretching his back, "It will rain before dawn," he says, smiling faintly. "The air smells too soft for Sunday." His words sound more like poetry than prediction. Some modern scholars have noted that evenings in castles carried a certain democracy of stillness. The same silence reached everyone, from the lowest servant to the highest lord. Under candlelight, rank blurred. All were equal before the slow approach of night. You stand and move toward the arched doorway that opens to the outer courtyard. The air there is cool and fragrant. The scent of rain is already in it, mingled with the faint sweetness of hay and the salt of stone. You look up at the sky and see a thin crescent moon rising above the towers. The clouds glow faintly in its light, drifting like silver veils. A lone guard paces the wall, his footsteps soft and measured. He hums quietly, perhaps to stay awake, perhaps to keep the darkness company. The sound floats down to you like a lullaby for the stones. Oddly, one old chronicle describes guards as dream keepers, men who protected not only walls but the sleep within them. You can see the truth in that image. The guard's lantern swings gently as he walks, a small, moving star, keeping watch over the stillness. You walk toward the herb garden, now shadowed but still fragrant. The air is thick with the smell of thyme and sage, leaves damp with dew. You brush your fingers across them, feeling the cold moisture cling to your skin. Somewhere a nightbird calls, its song slow and hollow. The sound echoes once, then fades into quiet. There is still debate among historians about how dark the medieval night truly felt before the coming of modern light. Some say the world then belonged entirely to stars and flame, while others argue that eyes simply learned to love shadow. Standing here, you can believe either. The darkness feels alive but gentle, filled not with fear but with depth. You turn back toward the castle. Candles flicker in a few upper windows, tiny islands of gold floating in the grey. The air hums softly, as if the very stones are sighing. Everything that needed to be done has been done. The fires are banked, the gates closed, the voices quiet. Oddly enough, a poet from the 13th century once wrote that a castle at night was the body of peace, sleeping in armour. Looking at it now, you understand. The strength remains, but it rests. The walls seem to hold their own heartbeat, slow and sure. You walk once more through the corridor leading to the bedchambers. The torchlight along the walls burns low, casting long, trembling shadows. Somewhere a harp plays a final few notes before falling silent. The music lingers in the air like a breath that never quite leaves. You reach your chamber and close the door softly behind you. The fire inside is almost out, glowing faintly red. You sit beside it, feeling the warmth fade from your hands. The quiet here is deeper than before, as if the whole world has paused to listen. The day has folded itself neatly into memory. The sounds, the scents, the faces, all drift together like threads woven into one long, gentle fabric. The castle around you feels timeless now, not a relic but a heartbeat stretching across centuries. You lie back, eyes half closed, the smell of smoke and linen filling your senses. The faint sound of rain begins against the window, soft and rhythmic. The stones seem to hum with it, carrying the music of water through their ancient bones. And so the castle sleeps. The people within dream of light and laughter, of fields and rivers, of simple mornings and warm fires. Above it all, the moon keeps watch, patient and kind. Now the castle fades from sight, its towers dissolving into mist. The air grows softer, and the night wraps around you like silk. You are still inside its walls, but the weight of history no longer feels heavy. It feels gentle, like a memory you can touch but no longer have to hold. The sound of rain becomes a lullaby, steady and calm. Each drop lands on stone, echoes once, and disappears. You imagine the gardens glistening in the dark, the fire reduced to embers, the people within breathing slowly in their sleep. The world outside has vanished, leaving only the heartbeat of quiet. You walk one last time through the corridors in your mind. The warmth of the kitchen, the laughter of the feast, the glow of the chapel, The whisper of thread through fabric, all of it hums faintly like distant music. You feel the peace that comes from knowing how small and beautiful ordinary life can be, even in a place built for strength. The stone beneath your feet cools, and the scent of herbs lingers like a promise. You exhale slowly, letting go of the day, of the centuries, of the noise that lives outside this dream. If you listen closely, you can still hear the castle breathing. It is quiet now, but alive, filled with warmth, memory, and the kind of silence that heals. Let your thoughts drift like the smoke of the final candle. The story has closed itself, but its calm remains. The world will wait until morning. For now, there is only the sound of rain, the rhythm of your breath, and the peace of being still. Sleep well.